Chapter 849. The 9 heavenly stars became an eternal phenomenon. Eventually, all of them drifted down and stuck to Lu Feng's body. However, these terrifying existences of destruction didn't destroy Lu Feng's body. Instead, after they descended, they completely fused with Lu Feng's body. The moment they fused, Lu Feng's physical body finally started to transform. His boundary finally started to rise at a frightening rate. Break through, crush. Continue breaking through, continue crushing. The rapid rise of his realm was truly an endless and unending rise. However, this wasn't the end. It wasn't over. Nothing was over yet. Countless great demonic mirages that filled the sky knelt down endlessly. When the 9 heavenly stars fused with Lu Feng's body, all of them stood up and returned to their previous arrogant state. A moment later, their figures started to blur and slowly fade away. Then, they started to disappear gradually. In the end, all of them were annihilated and disappeared. All of them turned into a single type of power that poured into Lu Feng's body. Every infusion of power was a qualitative improvement. When the power of the countless great demonic mirages entered Lu Feng's body, Lu Feng finally completed the ultimate transformation. Great completion, great completion! At this moment, he had finally reached the realm of great success. An inexplicable feeling appeared in the void. It was a kind of illusion. The moment this illusion appeared, an endless amount of power suddenly descended from the unseen world. It was the purest kind of power, without any impurities. It was filled with the perfect essence of power. This kind of power seemed to be able to be used on both the body and the soul. It was the king's prayer. This was the king's prayer that had been bestowed upon Lu Feng by many almighties when he had completed the incomparable sacred feat and truly surpassed the human monarch level. It was the most powerful and pure power that had ever been bestowed upon him. Although Lu Feng's accumulation was terrifying, the power of the king's prayer had fused with nearly half of the power in each of the 500 virtual kings. Among them, there were many almighties, exceptional almighties, and even the 3 unparalleled almighties. If all of their powers were combined, they would definitely be able to satisfy Lu Feng's needs. Abundant, abundant. At the moment, Lu Feng's boundary had begun a thorough transformation. The shackles of the demigod realm had been shattered, the shackles of the primary level deity had disappeared, and the shackles of the intermediate level deity were completely void. Finally, it had finally arrived. Lu Feng had finally reached the peak. He had entered a peak realm. This was the domain of a peak deity. This was the peak immortal realm. He had succeeded. He had really succeeded. After his realm stabilized at the peak of the immortal realm, the power of the king realm didn't disappear. Instead, it poured down on Lu Feng once again. However, this time, the infusion of power was completely condensed into Lu Feng's soul and rushed into Lu Feng's spiritual sea. He didn't know when the second primordial spirit had disappeared. It had returned to Xun Yuan's sea of consciousness. This was the time to increase the cultivation of a psyche master. As the only medium, the second primordial spirit couldn't exist in the outside world. Previously, Lu Feng's psyche master realm had already entered the divine realm. Over the past 3 years, he had been constantly absorbing those laws and accelerating his cultivation. As a result, he had almost reached the consummation realm. At this moment, after the infusion of countless pure power, Lu Feng's psyche master realm had soared to the peak in an instant. Divine Master Realm. This was the Divine Master Realm. This was the peak of the Divine Master Realm. Martial Tao Cultivation. Peak Deity Realm. Psyche Master Realm. Peak Divine Master Realm. Lu Feng had once again shattered the endless shackles and entered a new peak, a new peak. His strength would continue to shake the world and the galaxy. All the strange phenomena gradually disappeared, and all the changes gradually dissipated. Lu Feng slowly opened his eyes and stood up. When he felt the endless, terrifying power in his body, Lu Feng smiled. So this is the current me. He gently clenched his arms. The current him could clearly feel his own power. In terms of power, I am now comparable to any virtual king realm level 3. Of course, Lu Feng knew that he was only comparable to a virtual king realm level 3. If they really fought, he might not even be able to defeat a virtual king realm level 1. After all, he still did not have the power to refine the realm. Without the power of the realm, no matter how heaven-defying Lu Feng was, he would definitely not be a match for a virtual king. Of course, if he had reached the peak of the Divine Master Realm, even without the existence of the realm, Lu Feng would still be able to go against the heavens, break all the shackles, and kill the virtual King Almighty. However, he had just become a peak Divine Master. He was still 2 whole realms away from the peak Divine Master Realm. Therefore, the current him did not have the ability to do that. Although there are countless laws and truths here, and even the remnants of the realm's power, these have all been refined by experts. The most I can do is absorb them and increase my realm, but I can't turn them into my own power. However, this is not a big deal. My understanding of the realm is already sufficient. Previously, I was unable to refine the realm's power because my realm was not enough. This time, when I leave this sealed place, I should be able to comprehend it instantly. As long as he left this place, everything would no longer be an obstacle. When the time came, Lu Feng would be able to complete the refinement of the realm in Universe 2 and become a truly terrifying existence like the virtual king. After figuring this out, Lu Feng even had the urge to leave immediately. He wanted to immediately experience the feeling of being a peak existence and the feeling of being at the pinnacle of power. However, when he thought about the secret existence of the heavenly Futu in the depths of this place, Lu Feng let go of everything for the time being. In Lu Feng's mind, as long as he left this place, everything would become a reality. It did not matter whether it was earlier or later. What he was most anxious about now was to be able to immediately know the secret of the heavenly Futu. Compared to this, everything else was really nothing. It was nothing at all. After taking a deep breath, Lu Feng hesitated for a moment before summoning his second primordial spirit again. There was no need to say anything. The more powerful second primordial spirit immediately sat in the many restrictions and controlled them to activate their strongest defensive capabilities. At this moment, Lu Feng closed his eyes again and entered his consciousness space. Lu Feng's eyes flickered as he looked at the heavenly Futu in front of him. The last time he came here was to open the 3rd floor of the Futu Pagoda. Coupled with the time he spent cultivating in the ruins, Lu Feng had not been here for more than 10 years. Everything around him had not changed in the slightest. It was still the same as before. Of course, it was not that there were no changes at all. To be honest, this place had also changed. This was because Lu Feng could already see that above the peak, above the endless dark clouds, the 4th level was gradually appearing. Sure enough, the 4th floor has appeared and opened. I don't know what it will give me this time. If it was a gift of strength, then Lu Feng really did not need it. After all, he was already strong enough. He was already incomparably valiant and terrifying at this cultivation level. If the human monarch represented the ultimate limit of this cultivation level since ancient times, then Lu Feng was currently an existence that had surpassed this limit. He really had nothing else to ask for. I guess this is also a memory. It should be a continuation of an unfinished memory. Actually, if it's just a memory, the benefits I've obtained are not small. Although he had not obtained anything substantial when he had viewed the 3rd floor of the Heavenly Monarch Pagoda's memories, he had still not obtained anything substantial. However, Lu Feng had obtained a truly heaven-defying benefit from watching the confrontation between the supreme ruler of the immortal race and the ultimate beast king. The final moments of that battle had completely pierced through the chaos of history. Although it had been a simple battle, and he had only been a spectator, Lu Feng seemed to have been infected with some strange mysteries from that battle. This was a kind of spiritual enlightenment. All of this had allowed his power to increase continuously and reach a terrifying level. It was also thanks to the mysteries of that battle that he had been able to defeat the true celestial grade Rong Yuanyu and complete the incomparable sacred site. Now that he had returned to this place and faced this again, Lu Feng's heart started to waver slowly. Besides the addition of an additional floor, there really was no other change in this sky-piercing futu. When he saw this, Lu Feng's footsteps came to a complete halt. Once upon a time, he had completed a heaven-defying transformation in this place. He had become immensely powerful. If it had not been for this incomparably mysterious sky-piercing futu before him, then this heaven-defying Emperor Lu Feng would not have appeared in the current era. "I'm here again," with a faint smile. Lu Feng took a step forward slowly. A gentle step could cross thousands of miles. In the next moment, Lu Feng appeared in front of the main entrance of the sky-piercing futu. In this consciousness space, he should have been the supreme ruler, the creator of all things. In reality, this was indeed the case. Unfortunately, no matter how heaven-defying he was and how powerful he was in his consciousness space, he was helpless against the sky stupa in front of him. There was nothing he could do about it. It was as if the existence of the sky-piercing futu was completely outside of his consciousness space. Lu Feng had already been here many times. Everything around him was still the same as in his memories. Without any hesitation, he finally stepped in. Chapter 850. On the first level, the primordial scripture was still evolving, and the great demon true body was still in a cycle. He continued walking until he arrived at the second level, where endless laws overflowed. The laws here were too abundant, allowing Lu Feng's comprehension of the martial way to reach the pinnacle. Compared to the laws outside, the laws here were much purer. However, it was also because of this purity that Lu Feng couldn't use them directly. He had to slowly convert them into his own. Compared to the laws outside, these laws were purer and could be used at any time. However, the disadvantage was that they couldn't be used quickly. It could be said that this was the only flaw. Lu Feng chuckled softly. He could only chuckle at his own dissatisfaction. If it were anyone else, they would have gone crazy from excitement at having such an endless accumulation of laws. But now, he was complaining that they couldn't be directly absorbed. That was indeed a little too much. Another step brought him to the center of the sea of laws, where he walked up the stairs to the third level. Finally, he was back in the third level. Looking at the pillar that stretched up to the heavens, Lu Feng let out a light sigh. He looked around, but didn't see any stairs or exit. This place was the same as before. Nothing had changed. At this moment, Lu Feng frowned slightly. He really didn't know what was going on here. Logically speaking, after he opened the fourth level, the seal should have disappeared and the stairs or entrance should have appeared, allowing him to enter the fourth level. But, Lu Feng was really at a loss, incomparably at a loss. After a long silence, Lu Feng seemed to have thought of something. He finally placed his arm on the Saint Remain's pillar once more. Countless scenes surged forth. The evolution of the primordial immortal devil era appeared once more, starting anew. Although he had seen it before and more than once, Lu Feng couldn't help but be shocked when he saw it again. Everything was too shocking. The scenes continued to play. In the end, the supreme ruler of the immortal race defeated the final king beast, but could only watch as it disappeared into the chaos. At this point, the scenes finally came to an end. This time, as Lu Feng had expected, he retreated from the memory again. Lu Feng frowned slightly. He didn't understand what had happened that prevented him from ascending to the fourth level. If he couldn't ascend, then everything that had happened and him entering this place would have been meaningless. What's going on? Lu Feng scanned his surroundings, but the look in his eyes clearly changed when he looked at his surroundings. In the next instant, Lu Feng abruptly looked at the Saint Remain's pillar that had just left his arm. Countless ripples of emotion flashed across his eyes. So, it's like this. It wasn't that there was no passage to the fourth floor, but that the passage to the fourth floor was the Saint Remains stone pillar itself. The Saint Relic stone pillar was a stone pillar condensed from history. The stronger he was, the higher he could ascend, and the more history he would be able to see. This time, Lu Feng was no longer suspended in the air after seeing all of history. He entered the fourth level. This was the fourth level in front of him. Beneath his feet was no longer an empty space. This place had been replaced by a real entity. Exhaling softly, Lu Feng looked at the Saint Remains pillar in front of him with mixed feelings. Looks like it's just as I thought. This really is the history of the immortal demon era. It was hard to tell whether Lu Feng was happy or disappointed, but one thing was clear. He was looking forward to it. It's finally here. In that case, let me take a look at the history of the greatest and most mysterious era in history. Let me see what the future will be like. Lu Feng once again extended his arm and gently placed it on the stone pillar. In an instant, countless images once again appeared before his eyes. The sky was filled with dead immortals and demons, their corpses piling up like mountains. These were the true immortals of ancient times, the true immortals of the primitive immortal demon era. They were different from the current era. If one wanted to become an immortal, they had to be at least a golden immortal. In other words, only golden immortals, and only the virtual king, could be called immortals in the primitive immortal demon era. In the end, the Beast King retreated, but what it left behind was the collapse of the immortal demon era. Countless existences were solemn, their hearts indescribably shaken. Even though so many existences of the immortal race had fallen, in their eyes, this was still something they could accept, because the immortals had given birth to the greatest existence in history, the ultimate realm since ancient times. The ultimate existence that even the universe's origins couldn't restrain and resist, the unparalleled ruler. Hundreds of millions of people crowded around and worshipped. The existence of the three great beast kings represented the most extreme and terrifying creatures that were born in the primordial immortal Devil Age. If they could defeat it, it would mean that the immortals could truly open up all sea routes. They could truly dominate this era. Time passed slowly, disappearing without end. A long, long time later, after tens of thousands of years, millions of years, or even hundreds of millions of years, the immortals once again entered a more prosperous period. The entire primitive immortal demon continent, that incomparably terrifying and boundless immortal demon era, was finally completely developed and occupied. Countless immortals were born, and the primitive immortal demon era entered a peak glorious era. Many overlords had fallen in the battle against the ultimate Beast King, but now, the number of overlords had multiplied by a few times, or even a dozen times. In addition to the overlords, there were also countless immortals at the level of the temporal overlord and the universe supreme. The primitive immortal demon era was truly too powerful and terrifying. Lu Feng believed that even if the strongest of all future eras combined, they wouldn't be a match for this era. The primitive immortal demon era was too powerful, too terrifying. I used to think, many times, that it was the most powerful period of the primitive immortal demon era, but they overturned my understanding time and time again. I just don't know if this is really the most prosperous era of the primitive immortal demon era. Time went on, and the primitive immortal demon era entered an even more glorious era. On the primitive immortal demon continent, those terrifying and dangerous absolute lands had been completely conquered. Every world with the worst environment was overseen by a universe supreme. Their existence suppressed fate and completely transformed all the environments, making the most dangerous environments suitable for the immortals to live in. Prosperity, it was truly incomparably prosperous. But when the prosperity reached its peak, the turmoil began. The turmoil of the primitive immortal demon era wasn't the kind of internal strife, nor was it a war. With the eternal invincible existence of the immortals, it was impossible for any turmoil to occur. After all, the supreme ruler could easily suppress everything. The reason for the commotion was that an overlord of an epoch had discovered something. In the endless chaos, in the space-time outside the immortal demon continent, he seemed to have discovered something. That discovery caused the entire immortal demon era to be thoroughly shaken. Ever since the time of the Sovereign Lord, the primordial era had experienced the greatest upheaval in history. This time, it was the same as before. Only Divine King-level powerhouses were able to participate, and this time, the number of Divine King who walked out of the immortal demon race was many times more than before. Almost 1,000,000 Divine King. Lu Feng wanted to laugh, but he found that he really couldn't. He really couldn't laugh. If it were only 1,000,000 immortals, Lu Feng would have been able to accept it, even though it would have been shocking. Even if it were 1,000,000 immortals and demons, Lu Feng could still accept it. But now there were 1,000,000 God Kings walking out? This was far beyond the limits of Lu Feng's imagination. Among the 1,000,000 Divine King experts, there were no less than 10,000 time overlords and a few hundred epoch overlords. This was more shocking than the total number of epoch overlords in the future. However, it was a pity that there was only one supreme ruler, the most powerful eternal existence. There was only one supreme ruler. The majestic army of 1,000,000 Divine King charged directly into the chaos and the endless void outside the immortal demon continent. There were many dangers in the chaos and the void. This was the only place in the entire immortal demon era that the immortals hadn't conquered yet. The three invincible beast kings existed in the primal chaos. Their existence was the overlord of the primal chaos. In this place, there were countless extremely violent, peak-level demonic beasts that could shake the universe and provoke reincarnation, constantly appearing and roaring. What a pity! If it were the immortals of the past, they would definitely be annihilated in the face of such terrifying demonic beasts. But now the immortals were too powerful. Including the demons, the army of 1,000,000 Divine King was the ultimate force that could sweep away everything. Among them, the Supreme Immortal Lord was enough to intimidate all demonic beasts and become a true stabilizing force. As long as he was there, even the three strongest sentient lifeforms wouldn't be a problem. Finally, they arrived at the deepest part of the endless chaos. Killing was everywhere. Countless shocking forces were unleashed, causing the entire chaos to turn into nothingness. This was the power of the Divine King. Chapter 851. After shattering the forbidden mythological domain, I will become a first-level universe supreme, the pinnacle of the realm. Once upon a time, I thought I was already very powerful, very powerful. Even in the boundless history, I'm considered a powerful existence. But now, the corners of his mouth curled into a mocking smile. I was too blindly confident, too arrogant, indeed, he was too confident and arrogant. He was indeed powerful to become the Divine King. But when Lu Feng saw the 1,000,000-strong expedition army of the immortal devil era, all his arrogance was shattered into nothingness. In the primitive immortal devil era, even the overlords of the epoch were nothing more than this. Only the true ruler, only the one who has surpassed the ruler, is the strongest, the one who is truly eternal. Exhaling gently, Lu Feng's heart gradually calmed down. The scene in front of him had finally entered the final moment. In front of him was a mystery, an empty mystery. Lu Feng couldn't see or feel anything. However, Lu Feng didn't know why, but he felt that there should be something in this empty area. But what exactly it was, he really didn't know. At this moment, Lu Feng thought of a legend, a terrifying legend that had never existed before, one that he had only heard of by chance. His existence can't be remembered or engraved in history. And some existences are the same. They are beyond the scope of what history can remember. They are the true ultimate existences. Then, Then this being in front of me, is it the same? The mystery in front of him should really exist in the emptiness. But Lu Feng couldn't see anything. At this moment, Lu Feng was sure that the being here was like him, the great ultimate existences that history couldn't remember. His heart was in turmoil, trembling constantly. Lu Feng continued to look. Vaguely, he seemed to sense something, as if he had seen an earth-shattering secret. Everything was about to appear. The emptiness seemed to be an entrance. Although he couldn't see anything, Lu Feng could guess that this should be an entrance. But when the million-strong army of the Divine King arrived and opened the entrance, what they got was disaster. Legend has it that in the ancient era of Earth, before the Federation was born, there were still differences between countries. In the Western world, there was a legend like this. That is a legend about a box called Pandora's box. Now, this is Pandora's box, right? Looking at the horror in the emptiness, Lu Feng's mood was indescribable. From this opened area, Lu Feng saw familiar things. He saw those familiar things gushing out from it. That is, demons. That was a demonic creature. There is really an endless amount of demons. Countless demons are gushing out from the emptiness. The monsters that appeared at the beginning were indeed not powerful. In fact, they could even be said to be extremely simple. However, as the area that was shattered became larger and larger, the number of monsters also became more and more terrifying. In terms of strength, there was an earth-shattering change. Demons on the level of the Divine King began to appear. Similarly, demons on the level of the temporal Overlord appeared. Because of their innate existence, these demons were stronger than immortals and demons of the same level. What they carried was an indescribable power of decay. When the power of decay came into contact with one's body, decay would begin to appear and spread throughout one's body. In the beginning, with the help of the temporal Overlord, many immortals were able to resist the demons with ease and strength. But in the subsequent collisions, they gradually fell into a disadvantageous position. Gradually, their strength fell short of their will and they couldn't resist. Because at this time, temporal overlords appeared among the demons, demons from 9 remoteness sunken land. They actually appeared like this. I didn't expect these demons to exist in the primordial immortal and demon era and to be so powerful. What are they? Lu Feng took a deep breath. In the original universe, he didn't know what these demons were. He hadn't even heard of them. But now, Lu Feng heard of them for the first time and saw them for the first time. However, Lu Fenglai would rather not know about their existence. Exhaling softly, Lu Feng continued to watch the scene. The appearance of an epic Overlord-level demonic creature was indescribably powerful. It was too terrifying. Relying on the decaying power, the million-strong army of immortals and demons of the Divine King finally began to retreat in defeat. They began to lose people at a crazy rate. For a Divine King powerhouse to want to die, it was truly far too difficult. But now, Lu Feng knew that there was such a power that could easily kill a Divine King. That was a completely negative energy. Once one was infected by the negative energy that overflowed from the demonic creature, one would not be able to get rid of it. It would entangle one forever, or even completely enter one's body. In an extremely short period of time, it would corrode everything. It would cause the Divine King's body, soul, and even all of his strength to wither away and eventually be annihilated. It could be said that this method of obliteration was too terrifying, too terrifying. At this moment, Lu Feng rejoiced in his heart. He rejoiced that he had the great devil true body and the power of the great devil. In the face of this decaying power, not only would he not be killed, he could even devour it and use it as his motivation to advance. What on earth is this great demon true body? How can it have such a freakish power? Even the invincible overlords of the immortal and demon era couldn't do anything to these demons. But this demon can devour everything easily. This is really too terrifying. After obtaining the two supreme laws, Lu Feng felt that the primordial scripture and the grand devil true physique should be on the same level. They were two completely similar techniques. The only difference was that one mainly cultivated the soul and the other cultivated the body. But now Lu Feng vaguely felt that something was wrong. The origin scripture was indeed powerful. It gave Lu Feng the feeling that it was a lawless ultimate technique. But in the end, it was still a normal technique. But the great demon true body was different. It was completely different, because the existence of the great demon true body wasn't condensed according to the normal method. Its existence seemed to be targeted, and the target of its targeting was none other than those monsters. Sigh, yet another troublesome secret, the secret of sky-piercing Fudu had yet to be unraveled. Now, another great demon true body had appeared. This made Lu Feng feel helpless, very helpless. The number of overlords of this era was increasing. Gradually, their numbers exceeded that of the immortal race. Clearly, the demons were stronger than the immortal race. When they couldn't gain the upper hand in terms of numbers, the immortal race was finally on the verge of collapse. This was the moment when the ultimate combat power made his move. He made his move. The true ultimate existence of the immortal race, the immortal master of the unparalleled sovereign realm, made his move. After being silent for billions of years, constantly strengthening himself, he finally walked the path of the unparalleled sovereign. The ultimate existence of the immortal race didn't make a move after the battle with the final Beast King. Now, this was the first time he made a move after countless years. For the unparalleled sovereign, this was true immortality. Lifespan was no longer a big deal. Although so much time had passed, it was unknown how many trillions of years had passed. His existence hadn't aged at all. He was still at the peak of his life. Horrifying. Truly horrifying. His move allowed Lu Feng to see the complete state of the unparalleled sovereign. It allowed him to slaughter those low-level existences. Low-level existences. Yes, low-level existences. In front of the unparalleled sovereign, even the overlords of this era were low-level existences. They couldn't resist. They couldn't resist at all. Just a gentle wave of his arm was able to unleash the ultimate power of the sun and moon. With a gentle punch, an overlord of an era disappeared and was annihilated. However, it wasn't over. It wasn't over at all. Every time the unparalleled sovereign waved his arm, either an overlord of an era disappeared or countless demons at the level of the divine king were annihilated. After a few attacks, there were no longer any demonic creatures in the entire chaotic void. The immortal race had suffered heavy losses. Less than 1 in 10 remained. Of the once mighty army of 1,000,000, not even 100,000 remained. This kind of loss was unbearable for anyone. He had finally arrived at the entrance that had been smashed to pieces. Looking at everything inside, his face was filled with an indescribable color. He turned around and looked at the remaining god-kings of the immortal race, who numbered less than 100,000. His eyes were filled with determination. Then, he said something to them that no one knew. The remaining 100,000 immortals and demons shed tears of joy when they heard his words. They knelt down and shouted in agitation. However, the unparalleled sovereign remained resolute. All that was left in his eyes was the crack in front of him and the surging demons within. The final moment had arrived. Lu Feng could sense the unparalleled sovereign crumbling. He was sacrificing everything he had in exchange for the ultimate power. 14 ultimate immortal techniques appeared. These were the ultimate killing moves created by burning one's soul and life. Lu Feng would never forget this glorious moment for the rest of his life. In an instant of extreme splendor and beauty, the chaotic void that was more than 10 billion, 100 billion, a trillion super galaxies combined, was completely annihilated and vanished the moment the 14 ultimate immortal techniques appeared. This, Lu Feng couldn't describe the shock he felt. A super life-sustaining galaxy was already indescribably vast, but trillions of super life-sustaining planets weren't annihilated by the ultimate immortal techniques, but by the tremors of heaven and earth when the ultimate immortal techniques were born. This was what Lu Feng couldn't accept. Finally, the 14 ultimate immortal techniques were all sent into the crack by the unparalleled sovereign. Lu Feng could no longer feel the existence of any power. He could no longer feel any energy fluctuations. The entire world, the boundless chaotic void, seemed to have been completely annihilated. It had disappeared without a trace. In the final moment, Lu Feng saw the unparalleled sovereign, the most glorious existence in the history of the immortal race. His body was gradually fading away, gradually disappearing into nothingness. Finally, at the last moment, his body completely disintegrated, becoming an eternal power that completely sealed the crack that was opened before. Is this the final fate of the immortal race's ancestor, the only unparalleled sovereign? Lu Feng sighed softly, carrying with him an infinite amount of regret. The fate of the strong was to fight. Even if one became the ultimate expert, even if one possessed a power that not even the origin of the universe could resist, one would still die in the end. This was incomparably miserable. However, in the face of this, Lu Feng was filled with an inexplicable will after a slight depression. This kind of will was called anticipation and madness. He can only be said to not be strong enough. If he was strong enough, how could these demonic creatures be a match for him? How could he die just because he wanted to kill these demonic creatures? If he's really powerful to the extreme, if he's really at the peak of his life, then what's the point of all these? They are just ants that can be destroyed with a wave of his hand. To the sovereign, anyone below the God King level was nothing more than an ant. In fact, even God King paragons were considered slightly stronger ant. To the Divine King, the virtual king was just a slightly stronger ant. Chapter 852. Actually, in his eyes, in the eyes of the Supreme Ruler, who is known as the strongest person since ancient times, isn't he also an ant? However, he was so powerful that he wasn't even qualified to be recorded in history. In the end, he still walked into the cycle of reincarnation and didn't even have the slightest trace of his existence left behind. This isn't because of the terror of the opponent or the impossibility of the path. Everything is because he isn't truly invincible, truly powerful. Lu Feng's heart was trembling. His heart was swaying and his soul was trembling. He was the Emperor Lu Feng. In his life, he could only control himself. In order to truly reign supreme over billions of spacetimes, Lu Feng had to become even stronger. He had to be stronger than he. If he isn't truly invincible, then he is no longer my goal. What I want is true invincibility. Deep in his heart, some shackles seemed to shatter. At this moment, Lu Feng felt his soul gradually rising to a higher level. This was a belief in invincibility, not an increase in power. However, these changes in his heart and soul brought about endless benefit. This made Lu Feng fearless. He could eternally affirm his beliefs. Looking at the traces of history in the distance, Lu Feng once again fell into a state of deep contemplation. Sealed, it was completely sealed. In the end, Pandora's box, which contained countless demonic creatures, had been completely sealed by the supreme ruler of the immortal race. However, the immortal race had suffered too heavy a loss this time. 1,000,000 godly kings were mobilized, commanding the entire time and space. That was an extravagant lineup. Among them, there were more than 100 epic overlords, more than 10,000 time overlords, 1,000,000 universe supreme beings, and even supreme beings. With such a lineup, sweeping through billions of spacetimes would have been a cinch. But now, 90% of them had perished. Strictly speaking, the death of a single sovereign was worth more than 1,000,000 divine kings supremes. It could be said that the immortal race had suffered a serious blow this time. If not for the fact that the immortal race was the only race in this era, the immortal race would have been on the verge of collapse. The body and soul of the sovereign lord perished, but in his final moments, his soul transformed into a mysterious power and enlightenment. Lu Feng saw that power and enlightenment split into 8 parts, passing through the cycles of space-time and passing through the scars of time to enter an unknown era. After returning to the primitive immortal devil continent, the immortal race finally began to recuperate. Although the loss this time was so heavy, for the immortal clan, it was not a disaster that would wipe them out. After all, in the primitive immortal devil continent, they were always the strongest and the only existence. With this vast continent as a foundation, they could continue to develop crazily. The greatest disaster was the demonic creatures sealed in the seal. Those things were simply too terrifying, too powerful, and too numerous in number. Even a tyrannical existence like the immortal race could not resist them. The existence of those demonic creatures was also a form of encouragement for the immortal race. This will allow the immortal tribe to forget about everything else. Just as Lu Feng said, although there were no natural enemies, the immortal race had no natural enemies. But when they thought of the countless demonic creatures in the seal, the immortal race cultivated even more crazily. Sometime after this disaster, the remaining less than 100,000 divine king supremes finally returned to the primitive immortal demon continent. They did not sink into cultivation again, because they understood that this was the limit of their future. Although they did not perish in the battle against the demonic creatures, their souls and bodies had been contaminated by them. All of this meant that this was the limit of their lives. Therefore, they gave up on cultivation and focused all their energy on nurturing the next generation. With the careful nurturing of 100,000 divine king powerhouses, the immortal race finally ushered in a new era of rapid growth, an unprecedented and terrifying period of rapid growth. Immortals were born one after another. An immortal represented the true realm of the virtual king. And with the help of 100,000 divine king supremes, the number of immortals reached the highest point in the history of the immortal demon continent. Finally, after the great disaster, the first divine king was born, and countless divine kings began to appear crazily. One after another, and another after another. In a short period of time, the number of immortal race monsters increased exponentially, and the number of divine king supremes of the immortal race continued to expand. 100,000, 200,000. After a long time, the number of divine king supremes of the immortal race finally reached a new level. Finally, he had surpassed the peak of his life. 3 million divine king supremes. Lu Feng was speechless. His shock could no longer be described with words. However, despite his shock, Lu Feng didn't find it too hard to accept. Because these divine king supremes, 3 million divine king supremes, were all born under Lu Feng's watch. It could be said that Lu Feng had witnessed the birth of 3 million divine king supremes. What a pity! Although the number of supremes of the divine king, the overlords of time, and the overlords of the epoch has surpassed their peak, the current immortal race is still lacking. But if we really talk about it, compared to that glorious era, this time is still lacking a little. Lacking, it was truly lacking. Although the number of immortals had surpassed their peak, they were still missing the most elite supremes. They were missing the supremes. Lu Feng understood that without the supremes, the immortal race couldn't be considered the greatest race. They didn't deserve to be called the strongest. It was obvious from the previous battle that without the supremes, the immortal race was on the brink of annihilation. The one who had ultimately saved the immortal race was the supremes, the mighty supremes of the immortal race. Therefore, without the supremes, the immortal race couldn't be considered a true peak immortal race. The era continued to evolve, and it continued to progress. Finally, when the number of divine king supremes of the immortal race reached a shocking 5 million, a crack appeared in the void. Countless immortal race beings knelt to the sky, tears of blood flowing down their cheek. They wept bitterly when they saw the crack in the void. Lu Feng also recognized the marks and knew about them. This was because it was one of the 8 essences that the ancestor of the immortals, the supreme ruler, had left behind before he went extinct. The 8 origins had been sent into the annals of history by the immortal race's primogenitor. Now, the first origin had appeared. This origin wasn't something anyone could get their hands on. Many epic overlords had tried to get their hands on it, but in the end, they couldn't control it. Just when everyone thought that the origin was just a commemoration, the origin descended. It descended upon the body of a young existence. A legend began, a sacred relic appeared, and history continued. The taboo monarch. That young man was actually the taboo monarch. His birth was very ordinary and simple. Previously, he was just an ordinary existence. However, with the arrival of the origin, his taboo monarch bloodline began to awaken. His power as the taboo monarch was fully displayed. Heaven-defying, once again heaven-defying. The immortal race was aware of the existence of the taboo monarch. In the past, their supremes, the primogenitor immortal king, had become the supremes from the taboo monarch. Everyone attached great importance to this new taboo monarch, because this meant that the immortals had finally risen once again. Sure enough, the taboo monarch was the taboo monarch. He didn't disappoint anyone. In a short period of time, he'd completed his breakthrough and become a truly unrivaled apex expert. Apex Overlord, he is the Apex Overlord. However, he was a taboo king, possessing unmatched divine abilities. Even though he still hadn't taken that final step, he hasn't taken the final step yet, but he's already become the second strongest expert in the history of the immortal race. Indeed, he was the second strongest expert, second only to the immortal race's primogenitor, who'd become the supremes. He was the strongest expert in the current era, cultivation. It was another countless years of cultivation. During this time, the immortal race continued to develop. The existence of the Divine King made another breakthrough. Finally, there were 6 million of them. On the day the 6 millionth Divine King was born, a luxurious radiance appeared on the primordial immortal demon continent. It enveloped the entire immortal demon continent, causing hundreds of millions of immortals and demons to fall into a terrifying transformation. At this moment, the strongest expert in the current era of the immortal race appeared. He walked to the place where the origin had appeared in the past and waited quietly. After a long time, when the luxurious radiance disappeared, the imprint left behind by the primordial overlord slowly emerged from his body. This was the moment billions of people watched. On the primordial immortal demon continent, almost all of the immortal demons and divine kings experts appeared. They waited quietly anticipating. Amidst all the anticipation, he gradually fused with the demon god. Fusing with the last trace, he finally broke through. He'd completed it. He'd become the second existence to become the supremes after the primordial overlord. This time, the immortal race was in an uproar. They'd finally reached the peak, finally surpassed the true peak of the past. The immortal race now had the Divine King's army of 6 million. They were many times stronger than they'd been in the past. However, just when everyone thought they were about to set out again, wash away the disgrace of the past, and once again conquer the final destination, he, the second Supremes, had disappeared. Just like that, he'd vanished into the boundless void, completely without a trace. No one knew where he'd gone. Searching the entire primordial immortal demon continent, not a single existence could find him. Except for Lu Feng. Lu Feng watched him turn into an ordinary existence and live a quiet life. His eyes were filled with a strange light. Lu Feng didn't understand why he'd done this. Chapter 853. Time continued to pass. The divine king of the primitive immortal demon continent couldn't accept the fact that a sovereign had appeared, only to disappear in the end. Thus, they continued to cultivate even more fervently. The number of divine king powerhouses broke through again and again. 6 million was no longer a shackle. Finally, 7 million and 8 million arrived. However, it wasn't over. It really wasn't over. Because 9 million had arrived as well. At this moment, another eye-catching crack appeared in the void. Just like before, just like the first time, the imprint of the primordial immortal sovereign had chosen another taboo king. This was another solidification of history, another arrival of a divine relic. Just like before, it really was just like before. The most glorious moment was the moment of disappearance. The third sovereign was born, but he also turned into a mortal and quietly hid himself. The number of divine kings broke through, broke through, broke through. Finally, at 15 million, the fourth taboo king in the history of the immortal race appeared. He also obtained the sovereign's imprint and entered the greatest realm. However, this time, just as he was about to disappear, 1,500 divine king powerhouses knelt down at the same time, as if they were praying for something. Looking at the sorrowful expressions of his own people, the fourth sovereign didn't disappear in the end. He just stood quietly in space and thought for a long time. Finally, he issued a call. The other two sovereigns appeared. The three sovereigns stood quietly in the void. No one knew what they were communicating with each other. In the end, the other two sovereigns didn't disappear. They split into 3 groups and finally established the 3 great holy lands, the 3 great glorious lands. The immortal race was in an uproar. This time, the 3 sovereigns didn't abandon them. Instead, they existed together with them. Time continued to pass. Finally, when the number of divine kings reached an unprecedented 20 million, the immortal race was in an uproar. They prayed to the 3 sovereigns of the 3 great holy lands at the same time, hoping that they could form another alliance and conquer the final destination to reclaim their lost glory. Unfortunately, the 3 supreme sovereigns seemed to have come to an agreement, and chose to remain silent. Although they desperately wanted to prove the glory of the immortal race, they all understood that without the existence of the 3 great rulers, it was impossible for them to succeed. Thus, they fell silent. Development, it was still development, and it was even crazier development. Finally, the 4th mark appeared. This time, after the traces appeared, no one dared to fight for it. Because they all understood that these marks would eventually choose the right person. There was only a single type of person who was suitable for this. That is, the taboo monarch. Sure enough, the 4th chosen was the taboo king. However, it was slightly different this time because the taboo king was no longer an immortal. After countless years, the 5th taboo king born in the primordial immortal devil era was the demon race. Or it could be said that he was a demonic cultivator. Without exception, he finally entered the final realm and became the 4th supreme sovereign in the present era, the 5th supreme sovereign in history, and the 1st supreme sovereign among demonic cultivators. In the following years, demonic cultivators began to rise in numbers, surpassing any time in the past, and almost reaching a blowout. The 5th, 6th, and 7th taboo kings chosen were also demonic cultivators. This time, the number of demonic cultivators who became supreme sovereigns had reached 4. The number of supreme sovereigns in the present era had also reached 7. 7 supreme sovereigns. Regardless of whether it was the immortal race or demonic cultivators, they were all immortal race existences only because their cultivation paths were different. Although the 4 great demonic cultivators established the 4 great holy lands and stood side by side with the 3 great immortal races' holy lands, there was no conflict between the orthodox immortal race and demonic cultivators. Lu Feng sighed slightly at this point. He knew that according to normal circumstances, the 2 sides should have already clashed over who was the orthodox one. But as luck would have it, because of the decline of that war in the past and the existence of those demonic creatures, the two great factions had always been in harmony, because they had to face a similarly powerful opponent. The 7 supreme sovereigns established the 7 great holy lands, which pushed the prosperity of the primordial immortal devil continent to an even more extreme level. Now, the number of divine king powerhouses had exceeded 30 million. 30 million divine king powerhouses was an unimaginable number. In addition to the 7 supreme sovereigns, it could be said that the current primordial immortal devil era was more than 10 times stronger than when they'd conquered the primordial chaos. Finally, countless immortals and demons began to stir. They really didn't want to endure any longer. They really wanted to wash away the humiliation of the past and avenge their ancestors. Starting from the 3 great immortal races' holy lands, the divine king continuously knelt and kowtowed. They begged the mighty sovereigns to take action and lead them back to their former glory. Unfortunately, the holy lords of the 3 holy lands, the 3 pure supreme sovereigns of the immortal race, remained unmoved. They didn't agree and remained silent. On the other hand, many demonic cultivators also entered the holy lands of the 4 great demonic cultivators and begged the holy lords to take action. But the result was still the same. The 7 holy lords seemed to have come to an agreement. They didn't take action and chose to remain silent. Trillions of living beings couldn't wait any longer. They wanted to go crazy. After all, the 30 million divine king powerhouses were 30 times more than the first time they'd conquered the primordial chaos. As for the sovereign lords, they had 7 times the number of sovereign lord. As far as they were concerned, that was more than enough. But the result was still the same. Chaos was about to break out. But just as the chaos was about to break out, another crack appeared in the void, and the 8th origin appeared. The 7 holy lords appeared at the same time. They relied on their supreme might to extinguish the flames of rebellion. They suppressed the resentment of all immortals and demons. But this time, they didn't suppress them with force. Instead, they gave them a deadline. Lu Feng couldn't hear anything. However, based on his senses, he knew that the 7 great sacred masters had given him a final deadline. Sure enough, everyone returned. But Lu Feng could sense that these people hadn't simply sunk into depravity. They were paying attention. It could even be said that they were paying attention like never before. They were paying attention to the growth of the last taboo king. The last taboo king's growth was slow. No one knew if he was deliberately suppressing his growth, or if there was really a problem. Compared to the previous 7 venerables, his growth speed was more than 10 times slower. He was stuck at the final juncture and hadn't broken through for countless years. But he, who had become the 8th strongest powerhouse in the world, established his own holy land and started to nurture countless young divine king powerhouses. On this day, heaven and earth shook. The entire primordial immortal demon continent, this vast world, all the immortals and demons were shaken. They were completely shaken. They had been waiting for this day for far too long. And this day had finally arrived. Countless existences completely awakened from their cultivation grounds. They woke up and gathered towards the 8 holy lands. The 7 holy lords appeared and stood quietly at the top of the endless mountains. Their eyes were fixed in the same direction, the direction of the 8th holy land. The final breakthrough had arrived. This breakthrough ignited the will of heaven and earth, causing the holy lords of the 7 holy lands to be shaken. They were separated by an endless amount of time and space, but they had projected their own avatars. They were going to witness the arrival of this final moment. Although he couldn't hear it, Lu Feng could feel it. The breakthrough this time was truly a moment of unity, the final moment that countless existences were looking forward to. Brilliant lights and stars twinkled. The entire space-time was filled with praise. Lu Feng's heart was also shaken. He knew that the final moment had finally arrived. 8 supreme sovereigns. A total of 8 supreme sovereigns. What a terrifying lineup. And now, their divine king's numbers had reached 50 million. 50 million divine king experts. Compared to the 1 million divine king's army during the first expedition, this is so much stronger. Really, it was too much. This time, the 8 supreme sovereigns were all invincible existences. The number of epic overlords had reached a terrifying number of thousands. The number of time overlords exceeded 100,000. With such a lineup, eradicating an era would be a piece of cake. Lu Feng knew that they could finally take revenge. They could regain the glory and prosperity of the past. After the final breakthrough, the 8th Holy Lord stood at the top of the endless mountains, overlooking billions of living beings. His arm waved gently. Countless demonic cultivators were shaken. They gathered together. At this moment, the 8 Holy Lords seemed to have communicated with each other. They finally came to a common decision. All the divine king experts, and even all the immortals had appeared. All of them had appeared. Apart from those who had yet to reach the immortal level, all the immortals in space and time had made their move. The last time they set out, it was a lineup of 1 million godkings. This time, there were 100 billion of them. 50 million divine king experts, 100 billion immortals, and 100 billion virtual king experts. All of them had appeared. This will be the most terrifying expedition in history. This will be the greatest expedition in all of eternity. Lu Feng's heart was also shaken by the countless immortals and demons. After all, no one could remain calm in the face of such a shocking expedition. This was too shocking. Looking at the 100 billion virtual king experts, the 50 million divine king experts, and the 8 supreme sovereigns, Lu Feng felt his heart rise and fall. He could feel his blood boiling. He knew that the most terrifying battle was about to begin. Just as Lu Feng was about to witness the greatest battle in history, the scene disappeared. Chapter 854. Silence. All Lu Feng could do now was remain silent. There was an indescribable wry smile on his face. He really didn't expect that things would end up like this. It seems that I can only see the final outcome if I open the 5th layer of Tongtian Fudu. Although it's a pity, this is the only thing I can do. At the very least, this has given me another reason to increase my strength quickly. Lu Feng exhaled softly and slowly walked out of the endless restriction. At this moment, the 2nd primordial spirit had returned to Lu Feng's body and integrated into Shen Yuan's sea of consciousness. Looking at the terrifying restriction sect under his feet, Lu Feng hesitated for a moment before putting it into the space. I should be able to easily enter the deeper parts of the battlefield with this thing. If I encounter a divine king-level monster, with the characteristics of my physical body and the fact that I have entered the Divine King's forbidden mythological domain, these should be nothing. Once he entered the forbidden mythological domain of battle power, Lu Feng would become a true supreme godly king. He would be at the pinnacle of the supreme realm of the universe. With the existence of the great demon true body and the great demon power, Lu Feng believed that he would not be killed by a monster at the level of the Overlord of Time without using the ultimate immortal technique. Based on what I've heard, there wasn't an Overlord at the peak of the war in the final ancient era. If there was no Overlord of the era, with my current strength, I should be able to enter the deepest part of the battlefield to investigate. Although it was very dangerous, it could even be said to be perilous. Although he was not confident, Lu Feng really wanted to enter that place. He really wanted to know the secret of Tongtian Fudu. After experiencing the memory just now, he was even more so. Therefore, in Lu Feng's eyes, the so-called danger was no longer a big deal. In order to know everything, he decided to take the risk. He exhaled softly. Lu Feng released his power of power again and increased it all. Now, he was at the peak of the immortal realm. However, it was still impossible for him to break through. Although he could not break through soon, he could still rely on those monsters to continue forging his power of power and increase his realm to the most perfect moment. Of course, it was also because of this reason that Lu Feng chose to give up the existence of the immortal subsect and rely on his own physical body to force his way forward. After increasing all his power to the peak, Lu Feng's speed was more than 10 times faster than before. However, even if it was 10 times faster, it was still nothing to the underground sealed world. Therefore, even after a very long time had passed, Lu Feng still hadn't reached the edge of the true battlefield. From the breakthrough to the present, Lu Feng experienced another 3 years. After entering this dark world, Lu Feng had spent a full 6 years. 6 years, for an existence like Lu Feng, was really a long time. If Lu Feng hadn't experienced so many things in the past, just the 6 years of traveling in the dark would have been enough to make him collapse. Of course, that was just an if. Lu Feng had experienced so much. His will has long been incomparably firm. Although 6 years was really a long time for him, Lu Feng was always incomparably firm and did not waver in the slightest. In 3 years, the number of demonic creatures killed by Lu Feng had reached a terrifying level. Among them, there were no less than 10 demonic creatures at the level of golden immortals. Relying on the existence of the immortal sex subschool, Lu Feng used the power of the world 10 times and killed those golden immortal monsters 10 times. At that time, Lu Feng was only comparable to the peak of the immortal realm. After using the power of the world, he was able to destroy the golden immortal monsters. Now, he was comparable to the 3rd layer of the golden immortal realm. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't condense a world in this sealed world and couldn't have any power, then Lu Feng wouldn't have to rely on the existence of this subschool and could still easily destroy those ordinary golden immortal level monsters. The great effect of wiping out 10 gold immortal level fiends made Lu Feng very excited. After killing these 10 gold immortal fiends, Lu Feng's strength had improved, which was almost equivalent to killing tens of thousands of fiends at the heaven immortal realm. It could be said that in these 3 years, although Lu Feng did not break the shackles again and enter a more powerful realm, but it had perfectly consolidated the foundation caused by Lu Feng's previous breakthrough. Lu Feng also knew that the higher the realm, the more difficult it was for him to break through. Therefore, even if he did not break through for 3 years, Lu Feng did not have any anxious mood. In fact, I am now accumulating, constantly accumulating. Waiting for the right day, I will complete a heaven-defying breakthrough and enter a more invincible realm. This was Lu Feng's real idea. He knew that his existence itself was not suitable for those so-called rules. He could break through several realms in an extremely short period of time, but he could also remain motionless for a long time. However, there was one thing that Lu Feng understood, that was, whether he broke through or not, his battle strength would continue to grow stronger and stronger. After spending another year, Lu Feng finally came to the edge of the seal. It was the edge of the real seal. Feeling the turbulent aura of the monsters, Lu Feng exhaled heavily. In the beginning, when he first entered here, Lu Feng was still puzzled that the aura of the monsters here was not so dense. But now, he understood that it wasn't because the number of monsters here was small, but because almost all of the monsters were sealed in this real seal. Those were really just wandering around, and this was just a coincidence that they escaped. Looking at the seal, Lu Feng was silent. There were so many demonic creatures in the seal that Lu Feng was at a loss for what to do. If he was a peak true immortal or a celestial immortal, if he could condense the power of the world, then he would be able to charge straight into the seal. He would be able to enter the core area unimpeded. But unfortunately, those were all ifs. He was now only at the peak immortal realm, and even now, he had not condensed the power of the world. This meant that without the support of the power of the world, even if he had the power and realm of a triple virtual king, he would not be a match for the most ordinary virtual king. Therefore, Lu Feng was really hesitant and did not know what to do. If I continue to use the power of the world, I really won't be able to reach the end. After all, that kind of load is not easy for me to bear. After pondering for a moment and hesitating for a moment, Lu Feng finally nodded and made up his mind. In the end, he still entered the sealed land, the real sealed land. The moment he walked in, endless demonic aura surged, as if it was going to devour him. This kind of aura was a kind of completely decaying power. Lu Feng could feel that countless existences at the immortal realm and above had died here. The power that was born after their deaths was incomparably abundant here. But this power could no longer be used, and could no longer be comprehended, because it had been completely decayed. What a terrifying decaying power! This kind of decaying power seems to be able to completely devour anything. I really don't know how these demonic creatures appeared. Lu Feng fell into deep thought, once again recalling the existence of those demonic creatures that he had seen in that memory. So these things really did exist since the immortal devil era. They were really incomparably terrifying and incomparably powerful. Even such an extreme immortal race was almost annihilated. If the supreme ruler of the immortal race had not used the 14 ultimate immortal techniques, if he had not used his own physical body to seal the crack, the immortal race would not have existed. I'm afraid the immortal race would no longer exist. I'm afraid everything in the future would no longer exist. It could be said that the first supreme ruler in history had used his own existence to continue the hope of the future, so that the future could continue to exist. Now, these demonic creatures still exist, but it seems like they have been completely suppressed, and can only exist in the depths of the earth, sealed and suppressed by many immortal race powerhouses. This can be considered a piece of good news. Lu Feng smiled lightly and continued to walk forward. In this seal, there were too many demonic creatures, more than 100 or 1,000 times more than before. It could be said that every time Lu Feng walked a short distance, he would be able to encounter some demonic creatures. Of course, he was at the edge, and the demonic creatures he encountered were only at the true immortal realm. Demonic creatures of this level were really not in Lu Feng's eyes. Along the way, Lu Feng gradually increased his speed. After traveling for nearly a month, Lu Feng finally encountered a truly troublesome demonic creature. It was a golden immortal level demonic creature, the most powerful demonic creature Lu Feng had encountered so far. A golden immortal Hunyuan was equivalent to a peerless virtual king, an existence equivalent to a fifth heaven virtual king. Lu Feng was now an existence of the third heaven, and he was even a third heaven without the power of the world. When he encountered a fifth heaven demonic creature, he had no ability to resist. Therefore, at this time, Lu Feng finally gave up his previous plan. He chose to directly enter the array and activate the countless restrictive power of the immortal sex branch sect. In an instant, a golden immortal level demonic creature was instantly obliterated by those restrictive spells and turned into nothingness. Seeing this scene, Lu Feng's heart was constantly shocked. He really did not expect this restrictive spell to be so powerful. One had to know that just now, he did not use the most powerful restrictive spells at all. Feeling the power of the restrictive spell, Lu Feng gently exhaled. This restrictive spell is really too terrifying. If there was a disciple of the immortal sect who could open the restrictive spell, then I would really be in danger. At that time, he had not recovered, so he could not break the forbidden domain and enter the peak. So at that time, he was only equivalent to a high-level celestial immortal. Although the power of the immortal sex branch sect had been transformed by the human king and became more powerful, it was still incomparably terrifying when it was still primitive. At least, it was very easy to kill him, who was only a celestial immortal at that time. Thinking of this, Lu Feng also felt a burst of fear. However, after the lingering fear, Lu Feng became excited, incomparably excited. With the existence of this branch sect, it can be said that even if I don't break the forbidden domain, I will still be incomparably safe at certain times. It was comparable to a golden immortal's artifact. This was indeed worthy of the word terrifying. After killing the golden immortal level demonic creature, Lu Feng did not obtain any benefit. After all, it was not directly killed through his body, so he could not obtain anything. Although he felt that it was a pity, Lu Feng only felt that it was a pity. He would not regret it. After all, if it was up to him to fight against it, there was no possibility of success at all. After resting for a while in the branch sect, Lu Feng once again walked out of the branch sect and began to continue his cultivation of killing demonic creatures. Time continued to pass. Lu Feng's current speed was already 100 times faster than before. However, the sealed land was simply too big. Even with his current speed, he was still lingering at the edge of the sealed land after walking for nearly a year. This was simply inconceivable. It took me 8 years, but I only came to the seal and wandered around the edge of the seal. This seal is really too big. With my speed, in the original universe, these 8 years are probably enough for me to go through half of the Federation of the human race. This sealed land is actually much bigger than the territory of the human race. Lu Feng sighed lightly. This second universe was indeed called the second universe, and there was a certain reason. This place was really too big, too big. It should be known that just the sealed land was probably much bigger than the Federation of the human race. And this sealed land was really nothing compared to the entire Yellow Spring continent. It was just a very small area. Then, how big would the Yellow Spring continent be? Chapter 855. Forget it, I don't want to think so much. Anyway, the most important thing for me now is to cultivate. I can't rely on my own existence to travel through the void. The only thing I can rely on is my own body to move forward. When I consolidate my strength to the point of perfection, I will use the immortal sect to travel through time and space and enter the depths of the battlefield. The existence of the immortal sect's subsect was absolutely easy to travel through time and space. Although this was a sealed place, but for the immortal sect's peak weapon like the immortal sect's subsect, the obstacle was not big. After all, the existence of this subsect itself was composed of countless restrictions, and the seal itself was composed of countless restrictions. It could be said that they were of the same origin. Of course, at the beginning, Lu Feng didn't know. He later got the information from the second primordial spirit. Since he had already decided, then Lu Feng did not waste time. He accelerated his pace and flew inside. It took another year, and finally, at the end of the 9th year, Lu Feng completed a thorough consolidation. Now, he had stepped on the edge of a breakthrough, but Lu Feng also understood that it was still impossible to break through now. After all, until now, he had not accepted the condensation of the world, and there was no existence of the world's power, so Lu Feng simply could not continue to break through. Of course, from the bottom of his heart, Lu Feng did not want to break through like this. After he became a god, which was also an immortal, he only fought with these monsters, and basically won with a strong momentum. This made Lu Feng lose the kind of hot-blooded battle tempering. In the past, even if the gap between the two realms was short, but Lu Feng had carried out countless collisions in this time interval. It could be said that, basically before each breakthrough, he had experienced several life and death situations. And the consequence of this was that in every realm he was in, he was unable to break through. Although the time he stayed was not long, his foundation was extremely terrifying. Obviously, this time, it was just a battle with the monsters, so Lu Feng could not achieve a perfect smelting. So, he did not want a breakthrough. Now, this degree of perfection is enough, basically. All that was left was for me to start sharpening my fighting skills. It will allow me to reach the pinnacle of the immortal realm. After spending another year, Lu Feng finally raised all the martial Dao comprehensions that belonged to the immortal realm to the limit. At the same time, he had also condensed Lord only into a truly terrifying god-level martial art. Lu Feng still vaguely remembered that at the auction house in Wind God City in the Outland battlefield, a divine-grade cultivation technique, revenant art, was sold for a sky-high price of tens of trillions. After all, those were divine item points, not Federation coins. The art of revenant was already so powerful. Now that Lu Feng had condensed the Soul Sovereign, it would be even more terrifying. After all, the existence of the Only Lord was definitely the most terrifying of all the god-level techniques. Even the god-level part of the scripture of the human king cannot be compared to my Soul Sovereign. This was Lu Feng's confidence, because his Soul Sovereign had integrated his Emperor's will and so many true meanings into it. For example, during the Emperor's era, it could be said to be the ultimate attack that could not be solved. Compared to the god-level part of the scripture of the human king, the Soul Sovereign was really much more powerful. Lu Feng exhaled gently and slowly stood up from the endless restrictions. His expression was calm, a kind of complete calmness. Now, compared to when he had just arrived here, there was a lot more determination. His face did not change much, but now he gave off the feeling that he had really been through a lot. In these 10 years, Lu Feng could be said to have spent most of his time in battle. He had sacrificed far too much. In the blink of an eye, it has been 10 years, Lu Feng smiled gently, but there was too much deep solemnity and helplessness in this smile. It has been 10 years. I don't know if you guys are doing well? Now, he was already a man of 30 years old. Unknowingly, he was already close to 30 years old. The scenes of the past were like yesterday, making Lu Feng constantly reminisce. Gently exhaling, Lu Feng threw away all his previous expressions. At this moment, there was only determination in his eyes. It's not far, it's really not far. Believe me, I will go back. Soon. I will go back. My family, my friends, my lover, you have to be with me. Wait for me. Lu Feng did not close the restriction. Instead, he chose to directly enter the core restriction of the main sect. Lu Feng personally controlled the existence of the restriction and began to travel. He wanted to go to the deepest part, because Lu Feng had already felt that the call for him, the call that was related to Tongtian Fudu, was in the deepest part of the sealed land. In front of him, there were countless terrifying monsters, among which golden immortal level monsters were common. If it were in the past, Lu Feng would need to go through a series of tough battles to solve everything. In addition to the terrifying distance inside, if he wanted to reach the core area and waste time along the way, it would be impossible for him to reach it without dozens or even hundreds of years. But now it was different, because he was controlling the terrifying peak of the 9th grade artifact. Not to mention a golden immortal level monster, even if it was a peak golden immortal or a great principal golden immortal level monster, in front of a sub-school which had opened the taboo of combat power, it was nothing but a floating cloud or an ant. All the way it was completely unimpeded. The terror of the peak of the 9th grade artifact was vividly reflected at this moment, and it could even be said that it was unusually eye-catching. It shattered all of them, countless of them. Finally, not long after, Lu Fenglai arrived at the edge of the core area. At this moment, the monsters that appeared around him were almost all at the golden immortal level. Although the number was not many, it was much more powerful than the ones he had experienced before. Standing at the center of the restriction, Lu Feng looked ahead. He could feel that the level of the seal in front of him had obviously increased by a whole level. And in the surroundings, there were no monsters below the golden immortal level. Lu Feng understood that in front of him was the real core area, which belonged to the center of the seal. It was also the core area where the shocking battle broke out. It was the place where many experts died. If one were to say that the sealed land was dangerous, then clearly the core area was the truly dangerous place. Moreover, the degree of danger here was much higher than before. Lu Feng looked at the core area of the seal from a distance, and the next moment, he summoned his martial Dao incarnation. And the moment the martial Wei incarnation of the Sky Stupa appeared, Lu Feng could clearly feel an extremely strong aura calling out to him from the depths of this place. In his eyes there was an indescribable color. Lu Feng knew that there must be something closely related to Tong Tian Fudu in the depth. This was the first time that Lu Feng felt a calling so clearly. It could even be said that this was the first time that Lu Feng knew that Tong Tian Futu could resonate and produce a calling feeling. After a slight hesitation, Lu Feng walked down from the subsect. After putting the subsect back into the exclusive space, Lu Feng did not go in. At this moment, he was standing in the middle of the seal. Endless decaying aura was constantly eroding his body. If it was other existences, then they would not be able to withstand it. If it was a warrior below the god realm, then he would be completely decayed in an instant and become dust. This was the horror of this place. Even if it's a true immortal, or even a celestial immortal, I'm afraid that if they stay here for a long time, they will eventually fall into the fate of complete decay. This was just the edge. If he walked into the seal, then the level of decay would definitely increase by more than one level. However, all of this was nothing for Lu Fenglai. Because of the existence of the great devil true body, this decaying aura was completely restrained. When the decaying aura entered Lu Feng's body, it was completely swallowed in a moment and completely disappeared. Seeing that he was about to enter the core area, Lu Feng pondered for a moment. After a while, he finally tore open his own space and took out a metal object from it. This thing was given to him by Lu Feng's parents more than 10 years ago. At that time, they were still in the massacre abyss. Lu Feng told his parents everything there, and it was at that time that his parents gave him this thing. In the legend, it's a terrifying object that can deceive the Divine King. I don't know if it's true. In fact, although this was what he said, he already believed it in his heart. Lu Feng knew that his parents would not lie to him. According to my father, as long as I was strong enough, I could deceive even the Divine King. At that time, he was not far from deceiving the Divine King. At that time, my father's power was equivalent to a virtual king at level 1. But now, I'm equivalent to a virtual king at level 3. According to this, I might not be able to deceive existences at the Divine King's level, but I should be able to deceive existences below the Divine King's level. Then, let's do it this way. Use this object and enter. If I really encounter a monster at the level of the Divine King, I will. At this moment, a sharp light appeared in Lu Feng's eyes. I will directly shatter the forbidden domain. Directly shattering the forbidden domain was Lu Feng's limit. It was also Lu Feng's greatest trump card, his last resort. Usually, unless it was the end of certain death, Lu Feng would not shatter the forbidden domain. But this time was different, because in here, with his current strength, he absolutely had no combat power. In here, there are at least golden immortal level monsters. Now that I don't have the support of the world's energy, I don't even have the ability to collide with the simplest gold immortal demonic creature. Chapter 856. This was Lu Feng's helplessness. Even though he had 6 supreme powers, apart from the supreme powers that were at the pinnacle, they were the supreme powers that had surpassed the pinnacle. However, without the support of the power of the world, he couldn't collide with any powerhouses with the power of the world. Therefore, once he entered, Lu Feng had to be extremely careful. Once he was discovered, he would have to break the restriction in an instant. Otherwise, if he was targeted by those demonic creatures, he might be killed in an instant. Sigh, if it wasn't related to the heavenly piercing Fudu, I wouldn't enter no matter what. After all, it's still too dangerous inside for now. The heavenly piercing Fudu was too important to Lu Feng. Lu Feng really couldn't let it go. Therefore, although it was dangerous this time, Lu Feng still chose to enter. He still wanted to see what was in the end. Finally, Lu Feng opened the metal object. He completely activated the power of the object. In the next moment, Lu Feng stepped into it. Sure enough, it was just as Lu Feng thought. The decaying aura here was really incomparably powerful and terrifying. Lu Feng had a feeling that even a true immortal, a pinnacle true immortal, wouldn't be able to hold on for more than a few seconds here. He would be completely annihilated, assimilated by the decaying power, and turned into nothingness. However, Lu Feng still didn't feel any discomfort here. He was still as strong as ever. After activating the metal object, Lu Feng really felt that his existence had been completely hidden. Sensing the aura coming from the object, Lu Feng's eyes flashed with endless trembling light. I didn't expect that using it, I would reach such a level. Lu Feng could feel it. He could feel it. When Lu Feng used the artifact, he received some information from it. The information made Lu Feng understand that with his current realm and power, he could even deceive ordinary demons at the level of Hunyuan Golden Immortal by using this artifact. An ordinary Chaos Golden Immortal Fiend was equivalent to a quasi-life and death realm quasi-king, but only a quasi-king in the death realm. And if it was a peak Hunyuan Golden Immortal, then it would truly be the peak quasi-king, the peak life and death quasi-king. Such a terrifying expert, Lu Feng didn't even dare to think about it now. Being able to deceive an ordinary Chaos Golden Immortal Fiend saved Lu Feng a lot of effort. As long as we can enter the core area, then even if we shatter the Forbidden Domain and enter the Divine King's domain, it won't be a problem. After all, my time in the Divine King's domain is limited. Back then, Lu Feng's limit was 8 minutes. Now that he had condensed the sacred truth body and become stronger, he didn't have much time left. Therefore, Lu Feng wanted to save as much time as he could. This way, he would have more confidence in the future. I think that demons at the level of peak Hunyuan Golden Immortals can't be in these outer areas. They should be in the core area. The core area. That was where the invincible experts were buried. That was where the most terrifying place was. Therefore, along the way, Lu Feng calculated that he shouldn't be in too much danger. Thinking of this, Lu Feng gradually increased his speed. Using this artifact could really deceive all existences. It would make the surrounding demons seem as if they didn't see Lu Feng at all. This was the effect of the artifact. Feeling the powerful effect of the artifact, Lu Feng felt an indescribable feeling in his heart. In the past, he had believed that he was the most powerful existence and that everything else was just fleeting clouds. But now Lu Feng had truly experienced the use of an artifact, and experienced the terrifying power of an artifact. The existence of the artifact had saved him a lot of trouble. When I came in, I used the Pinnacle 9th grade artifact to enter the Immortal Sect's subsect, which saved me a lot of time. And now, it's also because of the effect of the metal objects that I was able to enter this place more easily. Sometimes artifacts really can't be lacking. He sighed slightly, a strange look in his eyes. However, in the next moment, this strange look disappeared completely and was replaced by a kind of unswerving determination. The effect of artifacts is indeed incomparable. However, if one really relies on artifacts, then one will never be able to improve. Lu Feng had never relied on anything. However, he had reached this level by relying on his own heaven-defying strength. Among the true evildoers Lu Feng had faced, the supreme monarchs, and even the king of massacre, almost all of them hadn't relied on any artifacts. This was because these people understood that relying on artifacts would never allow them to reach the peak. However, sometimes it is still necessary to make use of it. It didn't matter if he used it occasionally. As long as he didn't use it for a long time, everything was fine. Although he had already reached the maximum speed, he only wanted to enter the central area of the core, which was the smallest part of the area. However, it still took Lu Feng nearly a month to finally reach the core area. In more than 10 years, this was the first time that Lu Feng had been forced to stop. In the past, he had either stopped to break through or to comprehend. This time, Lu Feng had no choice but to stop. This was because in front of him, it finally appeared, a Hunyuan Golden Immortal level demonic creature? It is even a peak Hunyuan Golden Immortal level demonic creature. I didn't expect my luck to be so good. I just entered the core area, and I actually encountered it directly. Lu Feng was really smiling, but it was a bitter smile. The center of the entire core area, although it was only the core area and the smallest unit. However, it was still infinitely vast. The size of a demonic creature was only a few hundred feet. In this core area, the number of such demonic creatures would not be very terrifying. After all, this was already the peak demonic creature below the Divine King's level. However, Lu Feng did not expect that he would encounter such a monster as soon as he came in. It was a monster that was almost at the pinnacle. This scene made Lu Feng speechless. If it weren't for the fact that there is no universe origin here, I would really think that I am still in the original universe and that I am still envied by the heavens. This was Lu Feng's only thought at the moment. In the original universe, because he had walked the path, no matter what he did, it was not smooth sailing. It could even be said that he was extremely unlucky. That was because he was envied by the heavens, or even the heavens were jealous of him. However, this was not the case here, because there was no universe origin here. This time, he encountered such a demonic creature as soon as he entered, which made Lu Feng feel really helpless. However, even though he was helpless, this did not hinder Lu Feng's next move. Looking at that terrifying demonic creature, Lu Feng's bitter smile gradually disappeared, and it was replaced by a kind of madness. I didn't expect to use it now. His voice had become incomparably cold because he had finally made up his mind to shatter the taboo existence. He was going to enter the ultimate domain. At this moment, from Lu Feng's body, a truly invincible power appeared. It was a kind of power that surpassed any kind of limit that could be described. It was a kind of terrifying power that was filled with an endless taboo aura. The appearance of the taboo aura began to spread, and it began to increase Lu Feng's power, increasing continuously. The restrictions of levels, the existence of shackles, at this moment, all of them were fleeting clouds. All of them were jokes, real jokes. Shatter, all of them were shattered. Powerful, and unceasingly powerful. Lu Feng was really powerful. He had really entered the ultimate domain again. In an instant, his aura had been sublimated. Lu Feng was not surrounded by any extravagant rare phenomena. Compared to when he had reached the peak of his domain, transformed into an eternal monarch, and summoned the power of the 6 supreme forces, his appearance was a far cry from what it was now. However, the current Lu Feng gave people the feeling that, although he did not have the extravagance, he was incomparably terrifying. Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. This was because everything around Lu Feng's body had completely changed. It seemed to have become an existence of combat power, and it was actually filled with a terrifying battle aura. This was the supreme invincibility of the taboo mythological domain of combat power. Standing quietly between heaven and earth, and quietly watching everything in front of him, Lu Feng's eyes were no longer fluctuating. He had entered the taboo mythological domain of combat power. He was now the true Emperor Lu Feng. In the distance, the demonic creature seemed to have finally sensed Lu Feng's existence. It didn't stay any longer. Instead, it charged at Lu Feng in a frenzy. At this moment, the moment he saw the demonic creature madly attacking, Lu Feng's eyes, which were filled with battle aura, flashed with a trace of strangeness. He did not make a move. He just looked at the demonic creature madly charging towards him with a trace of strangeness. Facing him, who was at the level of the Divine King, the demonic creature did not have the slightest hesitation. It actually chose the craziest slaughter. This made Lu Feng finally understand two things. First, these demonic creatures really did not know what death was. Or perhaps, strictly speaking, they were actually dead. Therefore, they could almost completely ignore death. However, this made Lu Feng think of the second thing. Facing him, who was at the level of the Divine King, was completely indifferent. However, facing Empyrean Futu, why did these demonic creatures have such terrifying emotions? This made Lu Feng vaguely feel that the secret of Empyrean Futu was really not simple. Chapter 857. While Lu Feng was pondering, the demonic creature had already arrived in front of Lu Feng. It seemed to have sensed the terror of Lu Feng. This time, the demonic creature had already launched its ultimate attack. There was no suspense. There was no suspense at all. Everything was as simple as it could be. It was a demonic creature at the pinnacle of Hunyuan Golden Immortal level. It was a terrifying existence that was comparable to a quasi-king in the final realm of life and death quasi-kings. In the original universe, such an existence was a pinnacle invincible mighty figure. However, so what if it was a pinnacle invincible mighty figure? What could it do? Perhaps other divine king emperors would have no way to deal with such a demonic creature. However, it was a pity that the one facing it was Lu Feng. Previously, when facing the Sky Tuo Lynx, such a pinnacle divine king emperor, Lu Feng could almost easily suppress it with the Age of Emperor. When Lu Feng entered the forbidden mythological domain of combat strength, his existence was already at the pinnacle of the divine king emperor. In the face of the so-called invincible mighty figure, he could suppress it with a wave of his hand. One punch, a light punch. He didn't even use any powerful cultivation technique. With just one punch, the decaying body completely collapsed and was annihilated. Lu Feng stood quietly where he was. He was extremely pressed for time, but he did not leave. He was actually slightly stunned where he was. After a while, the figure shrouded in endless combat strength finally showed a hint of turbulence. A strange color appeared in Lu Feng's eyes again. So, everything is actually like this. So, the forbidden mythological domain of combat strength is actually like this. Lu Feng had completely seen through the existence of the forbidden mythological domain of combat strength. He really understood some of the essential characteristics of this forbidden mythological domain of combat strength. The time to enter the forbidden mythological domain of combat strength should be related to the strength of one's physical body. When I had just condensed the supreme godly body, I could only support it for 8 minutes at most. But now, after condensing the holy truth body, I can already achieve the enhancement of combat strength for 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Compared to the previous 8 minutes, it was almost 4 times longer. And this quadruple time was enough for Lu Feng to do many shocking things. Furthermore, I can feel that the current me seems to have become even stronger. I feel that my battle prowess has become even more terrifying. This kind of terror has nothing to do with my cultivation level. It seems that what really matters is my desire to win. As long as I win, I'll be able to walk further in the forbidden mythological domain. As for my combat strength, it's even more terrifying. Lu Feng completely understood. He finally understood everything. Lu Feng could feel that as long as he continued to win, he would be able to go further in the forbidden mythological domain. His power would only grow stronger and stronger. He exhaled softly. Up until now, he had never failed in the true sense of the word. Even when facing opponents who were stronger than him, Lu Feng was still crazy to the extreme and still suppressed all of his opponents. And now, he finally tasted the benefits of such continuous victories. Last time, I entered the king's domain and defeated the Tian Tuo Lynx. Then, I used the ultimate immortal technique and killed the powerful temporal overlord. Although I relied on the forbidden domain to do that, but strictly speaking, everything was done by me. I did it all by myself. Therefore, I have entered a whole new realm. My control over victory has entered the realm of the legendary. My battle prowess is even stronger in the forbidden mythological domain. I'm going further and further on the road of Emperor's Tao. If it was just an ordinary victory, it didn't matter at all. It wouldn't allow him to go further on the road of Emperor's Tao. But if his opponent was the Divine King, if it was a crazy battle between life and death, then everything would change. Lu Feng had become even stronger. 30 minutes is already enough. Looking ahead, Lu Feng took a gentle step forward. And it was this gentle step that seemed to have crossed endless time and space and traversed hundreds of millions of miles of distance. The current Lu Feng was the Divine King at the peak of the universe supreme level. His power was unimaginable. Although he didn't have the magical powers of the other three mythological forbidden domains, in terms of battle prowess alone, Lu Feng was the true unbeatable universe supreme. The distance of a single step couldn't be compared to the distance it had taken before. Along the way, the number of demonic creatures was indeed large. They were all over the ground, and they were incomparably ferocious and terrifying. Among them, there were countless demonic creatures at the golden immortal level, and there were also many demonic creatures at the golden immortal level. Even among them, Lu Feng also encountered no less than 100 demonic creatures at the golden immortal level. However, whether it was the golden immortal level demonic creatures or the ordinary golden immortal level demonic creatures, they all rushed over crazily after seeing him. They didn't understand the terrifying gap between Lu Feng and them at all. Looking at these crazy demonic creatures that had lost all their rationality, Lu Feng's eyes were cold. Because he didn't have the slightest bit of mercy for these things that didn't have any life fluctuations. There was only one word, and that was to kill. He kept waving his arm, and one after another, the golden immortal level demonic creatures were completely annihilated. In the past, Lu Feng killed them one after another. But now, after becoming such a great existence, he killed them one after another. Lu Feng's arm didn't stop for a moment. His eyes were filled with the determination to kill. Although there were many demonic creatures, hundreds of thousands of them. But even hundreds of thousands of demonic creatures were nothing in front of Lu Feng. Lu Feng effortlessly erased everything and passed through it without breaking a sweat. During this period, it didn't even take a few moments. This was the power he possessed at the moment. Vaguely, Lu Feng became more and more excited. Because he really felt it. He really felt the kind of existence that made him excited and made him feel like he was calling out to him. I should be here. After becoming the Divine King, he was incomparably calm. But at this moment, Lu Feng couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart. He just thought of a possibility, and he couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart. After taking countless deep breaths, Lu Feng finally quickened his pace. Because he vaguely saw it. He saw it in front of him, full of the power of the ultimate seal, the ultimate brilliance in the endless hazy void. In the next moment, Lu Feng finally arrived at the edge of the seal. In his eyes, there was only this sealed world and everything in this seal. Hazy. It was really hazy. It could block everything. Even the supreme consciousness of the Divine King couldn't see it. This was undoubtedly inconceivable. If it had been any other time, Lu Feng might have thought about it carefully. But this time, he really didn't have any thoughts. His eyes and heart were filled with an indescribable excitement. In the next moment, Lu Feng took a deep breath and unleashed a terrifying power behind him, completely wiping out the countless demonic creatures behind him. After finally clearing out all the demonic creatures, Lu Feng finally released it. He finally summoned his martial path avatar, the Tongtian Futu, again. At this moment, the Tongtian Futu was different from before. Of course, this difference didn't mean that the overall appearance had changed completely. Instead, it was because the Tongtian Futu had changed from 3 layers to 4 layers. The top of the four-layer Tongtian Futu was still hidden in endless dark clouds. However, the 4 layers that were revealed in reality were even more mysterious and abstruse. An extremely ancient and desolate aura was displayed from these 4 layers. Even the surrounding space-time traces were left behind. The Tongtian Futu had no effect on the current Lu Feng. This was because although his Tongtian Futu had reached the 9th level, it was still at the 7th level after all. For the Divine King, unless it was a martial path avatar in the forbidden mythological realm, it would have no effect at all. However, at this moment, Lu Feng still summoned the Tongtian Futu. All of this was because Lu Feng felt it. In the depths of this seal, there was a connection between souls and a call between minds. It went directly into his mind space, and called out to the body of the Tongtian Futu. Therefore, Lu Feng directly summoned the martial path avatar of the Tongtian Futu. He wanted to see the real result. Finally, when the Tongtian Futu was completely formed, Lu Feng really felt it. Vaguely, he seemed to have seen in the distance, in the layers of fog, hidden in the deepest part, I've experienced so much and seen so much. So far, I've only seen the existence of the Tongtian Futu on the Gufang star. At other times, even in history, in everything I know, the Tongtian Futu is extremely mysterious and there is no trace of it. But here I actually saw it at the moment when the martial path avatar of the Tongtian Futu appeared. Lu Feng felt it and even saw it directly. In the center of the seal, in the ultimate seal, there was a mysterious aura. He saw the image in the most eternal position in the infinite. It was a pagoda with traces of 6 floors. It was the phantom of a pagoda that possessed a mysterious and invincible power. And Lu Feng knew the existence of that shadow. It was the Tongtian Futu. Gently exhaling, Lu Feng finally took a step forward. He knew that this would be the core area of the seal, and that this was where the true pinnacle of the demonic beasts resided. Perhaps there would be many demons on the level of the Divine King. However, at this moment, Lu Feng was no longer going to retreat. He really forgot about the danger, forgot about everything. In his eyes, there was only the vague sight of the Tongtian Futu in front of him. With a gentle step, he walked into it. The endless haze kept squeezing Lu Feng's body, as if it wanted to seal Lu Feng as well. However, after sensing that Lu Feng was not a demon, the violent sealing power gradually disappeared and finally calmed down. Lu Feng exhaled softly. He could naturally feel how terrifying and violent the aura of the seal was. Lu Feng believed that if he did not verify that he was not a demon at the last moment, he would not be able to escape the fate of being sealed, no matter how strong he was. Moreover, Lu Feng always had an inexplicable feeling about the power of the seal. It was an indescribable feeling. Unfortunately, this feeling only appeared for a moment. As the power of the seal faded, Lu Feng could no longer feel that feeling. Looking at the haze around him, Lu Feng's expression was complicated. Legend has it that the one who sealed this place was a terrifying immortal venerable from another continent. But is this power really something that a flowing time immortal venerable can do? Lu Feng was very doubtful, because this kind of power should not be something that a flowing time immortal venerable should be able to display. The flowing time immortal venerable was also the flowing time overlord. Lu Feng had also seen the strength of the flowing time overlord. The slaughtering heaven god, also known as the Divine King, was very powerful. Lu Feng knew about his strength. Lu Feng had even personally taken action to completely suppress and obliterate a flowing time overlord. After coming into contact with 3 flowing time overlords, Lu Feng had a general understanding of the power of the flowing time overlord. However, the power of the seal that appeared here was really too strong, too terrifying. This was not a power that a flowing time overlord should possess. To be able to make me feel an irresistible power, there is no other way. If that immortal venerable is really just the flowing time immortal venerable, He is most likely the strongest flowing time immortal venerable. However, there is a condition for all of this, a real condition. His eyes were flashing with brilliance. This condition is that the time cannot be too long. Back then, that immortal venerable had descended on the Yellow Springs continent and completely sealed the chasm battlefield. The time when all of this had happened was in the ancient End era. It was the first era after the end of the Four Desolates, the fifth era of the Second Universal Era, the ancient End era. There was a gap of 6 eras between now and now. How long would the 6 eras last here be? How shocking would that be? Lu Feng believed that in terms of time, it could no longer be described as 100 million years. Chapter 858. The Time Immortal Venerable is said to live and die with time. He has the power to never age. But this is just an exaggeration. Their lifespans are really limited. Only the ultimate realm of the Divine King realm, the mighty existence that can travel through history and exist for all eternity. Only when there is no world-shaking annihilation and no great calamity of the universe, can they truly live forever and be indestructible. Furthermore, the sealing power of this place has not dissipated in the slightest even after such a long time. This proves that the existence that sealed this place should be the epic immortal venerable. You saw it very clearly. Lu Feng was stunned. The next moment, cold sweat broke out all over his body. Almost instantly, he felt his soul tremble. Lu Feng could not imagine that there was still an existence here. There was actually a living being. Even after entering the forbidden domain of God Kings, he was still able to hide from her and remain by her side the entire time. He was able to watch her every move and listen to her every word. But soon, Lu Feng's heart calmed down slightly because he had figured it out. Since it could make a sound, it could not be a demonic creature. As long as it was not a demonic creature, everything was fine. He stood quietly in place, although he was not very nervous now. However, Lu Feng had already raised all his attention to the peak. He was now the Divine King, a supreme being who looked down on billions of creatures. He was also at the peak of the first level of the Divine King's 3 realms, the Universe Supreme. His strength was far from what those people could compare to. Under extreme madness, he could even kill the Time Overlord. He was a power of power. Therefore, although Lu Feng was shocked by the sudden appearance of this existence, he was not too nervous. The surroundings were hazy. This illusory sealed world completely restricted everything. Lu Feng's consciousness, which belonged to the Divine King, could not spy on anything. Knowing the horror of this place, Lu Feng simply gave up all his consciousness perception. At this moment, he was looking at everything with his eyes. The voice finally appeared. "Who are you?" Lu Feng frowned and asked the question in his heart. After hearing Lu Feng's words, the voice was silent for a moment. Finally, it slowly sounded. But this time, it clearly carried a slightly gloomy feeling. "Who am I? Just now, didn't you already guess my level?" Lu Feng was slightly stunned. After a moment, his expression changed. At this moment, Lu Feng's voice changed. "Could it be that you are the foreign immortal venerable who sealed the abyss battlefield of the Yellow Spring continent?" When Lu Feng had been talking to himself, the only thing he had mentioned was the immortal venerate expert from the other continent. At this moment, other than being shocked by this person's identity, Lu Feng also vaguely thought of something. You are the epic immortal venerable." He'd guessed that this person was the epic immortal venerable, an existence on the same level as the epic overlord. The epic overlord. That was an invincible existence of an era. Although he'd seen many overlords of time in the primordial era, that was only the primordial era. After the end of the primordial immortal devil era, there were only a few time overlords since ancient times. But at this moment, a temporal overlord had actually appeared before him. How could Lu Feng not be astonished by this? The voice rang out once again. I heard your guesses just now. I have to say you're mostly correct. However, there are some things you're wrong about. Lu Feng fell silent, quietly waiting for the mysterious epic Immortal Venerable to explain. You're right about my identity. In the final era, I was indeed the prime of the eternal sacred land, one of the three sacred lands. In other words, I was the epic Immortal Venerable. Lu Feng nodded to himself. Sure enough, this was the case. However, you're wrong about the rest of your guesses. You guessed that my power has continued to this day, and that I've kept this place sealed. You're wrong about that. I'm only the epic Immortal Venerable. I'm not the ultimate existence of the 33 layers of ultimate heaven. I'm not the almighty and invincible sovereign. How is it possible for my power to last for so many cycles and still remain sealed here? Lu Feng frowned slightly. If you're not the one suppressing this place, is there someone else? Or could it be, at this moment, a strange and complicated light appeared in Lu Feng's eyes. He seemed to have thought of something. Could it really be the mysterious epic immortal sighed in admiration when he heard Lu Feng's murmurs? I have to say you're the most heaven-defying genius I've seen in countless cycles. Even the emperor of this era and the mysterious epic Immortal Venerable can't compare to you. Your guess is indeed correct. That's why I was able to seal this place for such a long time. The most important reason was that I used all of my power to summon the great Buddha's shadow to descend here. It was its existence that completely suppressed this place and lasted for such a long time. Lu Feng was silent, but his eyes flashed with a strange light. He'd heard it. You are talking about Fu Tu. Is it the same Futu as my martial avatar, Tongtian Futu? Lu Feng was excited. He knew the mysterious epic Immortal Venerable knew a lot. He didn't know everything about Tongtian Futu, but he knew a lot more than Lu Feng did. Otherwise, he wouldn't have called him Futu. The voice didn't answer. Instead, it said something unrelated. Come here. With the vision of Futu you've condensed, you should be able to walk into the center. Also, in this place you can already unload those powers. The power of a forbidden domain is terrifying and difficult to maintain. For someone like you who's just become a god, using it for a long time will harm your soul and body. Lu Feng was silent. Being in the Emperor's domain for a long time was indeed an extreme burden on his soul and body. However, should Lu Feng really leave? He wasn't sure if the mysterious epic Immortal Venerable had any ill intentions. After all, this was an unfamiliar environment. Although Lu Feng was crazy and willing to take risks, it didn't mean he didn't care about his life. Therefore, Lu Feng hesitated. However, the mysterious epic Immortal Venerable's voice sounded again. You don't have to worry. This is the sealed land. No power can be used here. This is the sealed land of Futu. Besides Futu, no one can use any power here. Unless you're an existence greater than Futu. Hearing this, Lu Feng was slightly taken aback. However, he still tried to use his power of power. However, after a while, Lu Feng's expression changed drastically. Lu Feng felt that he couldn't use any power at all. Since he couldn't use any power, it didn't matter whether he was in the Emperor's domain or not. Exhaling slightly, Lu Feng completely retreated from the Emperor's domain. His face was very pale. Although he hadn't been in the Emperor's domain for long, his body had become stronger. However, his main body was still someone who just reached the Immortal Venerable realm. In this short period of time, Lu Feng's body had already been injured. After dispersing all the power, Lu Feng let out a sigh of relief. He waited for his condition to reach its peak before summoning the Babel Stupa once again. This time, after entering the sealed land, the calling power was even more obvious. Lu Feng could feel this strong calling at all times, making it almost impossible for him to stop. Lu Feng closed his eyes and sensed for a moment. In the next moment, his feet finally moved. Although his surroundings were still hazy, when Lu Feng used his heart to sense Tong Tian Futu, he seemed to be able to see everything. He could see any path clearly. In the beginning, Lu Feng was just moving forward slowly. However, later on, his speed gradually increased. At the last moment, Lu Feng seemed to have received some kind of power, which made his speed exceed his peak speed by 10 times or even 100 times. Lu Feng's speed was really too fast, too fast, too fast. In the blink of an eye, all the hazy surroundings flew past him. Finally, after flying for an unknown amount of time, all the hazy surroundings disappeared. Looking at everything in front of him, Lu Feng took a deep breath. This was because Lu Feng saw a scene that really shocked him. Are these all demonic creatures? Are these all demonic creatures at the level of the Divine King? The size of a demonic creature was directly proportional to its strength. The more powerful a demonic creature was, the more terrifying its body would be. A demonic creature at the peak of the Hunyuan Golden Immortal level was 1,000 feet in size. However, the demonic creatures here were all thousands of feet in size. In front of him, Lu Feng even saw demonic creatures that were tens of thousands of feet in size, or even tens of thousands of feet in size. This undoubtedly showed that the existence of these demonic creatures was even more terrifying than the demonic creatures at the peak of the Hunyuan Golden Immortal level. The demonic creatures at the peak of the Hunyuan Golden Immortal level were already at the peak of the realm below the Divine King. Therefore, the level of these demonic creatures must be at the level of the Divine King. Lu Feng's heart kept trembling because the number of demonic creatures at the level of the Divine King was endless. There were at least thousands or even thousands of demonic creatures at the level of the Divine King. Of course, Lu Feng was only shocked when he saw these demonic creatures. There was no fear, because at this moment, these demonic creatures were shrouded in endless hazy brilliance, as if they had completely lost their breath of existence. They were all quiet, extremely quiet. Lu Feng knew that this was a state that would only appear after being suppressed and sealed. As you can see, this is the peerless power of Futu. Only its existence can truly suppress these demonic creatures. Even though this is just a little projection of Futu's power, but just a little of it is enough. The voice slowly sounded, waking Lu Feng from his shock. His gaze turned to the distance, to the towering figure that stood between heaven and earth. This is the towering Futu. Chapter 859. If an ordinary person were to see this sky stupa, they would definitely be shocked to the extreme. After all, this sky stupa was simply too big and shocking. It stood there quietly, as if connecting heaven and earth. Though it was only an illusory image, the ancientness and desolation that swirled around it were indescribable. Facing it was like facing an entire era, a world, a space-time, and even the universe. However, when Lu Feng saw the sky-piercing pagoda, he was only slightly moved by the aura on it. He wasn't too shocked. In Lu Feng's mind, the piercing Futu in front of him couldn't compare to the one he'd seen in Lu Feng's mind. After sizing it up for a while, Lu Feng had some thoughts. Though the piercing Futu in front of him was basically the same as the one in his mind, there were many differences in the details. Compared to the Futu in front of him, the Futu in Lu Feng's mind was much more mysterious. There were many more runes on its surface as well. Of course, Lu Feng wouldn't have thought much of it if that was all. Actually, what made Lu Feng feel the biggest difference was that there were no images at all on it. Those were most likely the images of the Divine King. In the empty space around the runes on the piercing Futu in his mind, there were countless images that resembled relief. They were all humanoid or humanoid existences. To Lu Feng, they gave him the impression that they were images of the Divine King. However, there were no such images on the piercing Futu in front of him. Finally, Lu Feng adjusted his state of mind and cast his gaze on the silent figure beneath the enormous Futu. "Are you the prime of the eternal sacred land?" Lu Feng had learned from Lin Yu that there were 14 continents in the second universe. The most powerful sects on each continent were emperor-ranked sections. For example, Lin Langtian, where Lin Yu's family lived, was an emperor-ranked faction on the Yellow Springs continent. However, emperor-ranked factions weren't the most powerful in the second universe. That was because, above these dozens of emperor-level forces, there were still 3 terrifying existences. They were the 3 sacred lands. The ancient being nodded slightly at Lu Feng's question. There was a hint of nostalgia in his eyes. That's right. I'm the eternal immortal lord of the eternal sacred land from the ancient End era. Lu Feng looked at the eternal immortal lord from the ancient End era. His tone was filled with a strange emotion. The 3 sacred lands are the sovereign sacred land, chaos sacred land, and eternal sacred land. They've existed since time immemorial. They've existed through countless epochs and survived the 4 desolaces and 6 ancient times. Their heritage is unimaginable. I never thought that the one who came here and sealed this place with his own life would be the immortal lord of the eternal sacred land. An honorable immortal master had chosen to use his own life to seal this place. From this, it could be seen that the Holy Lands truly lived up to its name. The eternal immortal lord chuckled softly, as if he'd heard Lu Feng's exclamation. You've misunderstood the fundamental purpose of the 3 sacred lands' existence. Misunderstood? Lu Feng frowned in confusion. The eternal immortal lord didn't seem to understand Lu Feng's expression at all. He was still smiling as he spoke. The 3 sacred lands aren't factions that fight for supremacy. Our existence is different from the emperor-ranked sections. They exist for the sake of strength or even dominance. However, the 3 sacred lands exist to protect this place, the last remnant of the primordial era. Lu Feng's eyes widened and his arm twitched slightly. This was something that only happened when Lu Feng lost his composure. Lu Feng had learned a few things from Lin Yu after arriving here. In the minds of those who lived here, the second universe was the primordial immortal demon continent. The 14 continents were the remnants of the primordial immortal demon continent, broken into 14 pieces by the final war. However, Lu Feng now understood that not everyone thought so. At the very least, the immortal lord of the sacred lands didn't think so. He knew the true purpose of this place. The eternal immortal lord's expression changed when he saw Lu Feng's expression. It seems that you know the truth as well. Lu Feng fell silent for a moment, then nodded slightly. The eternal immortal lord smiled faintly at Lu Feng's acknowledgement. Yes, I know the truth. The 3 sacred lands exist to protect this remnant of the primordial immortal demon era. We exist to stabilize this place. After all, this place isn't so peaceful. Lu Feng knew what the eternal immortal lord meant. He glanced at the terrifying demons that towered tens of thousands of feet tall and sighed softly. These demons are the so-called restlessness of the primordial immortal demon era. The eternal immortal lord's eyes shone with helplessness. These demons were mentioned in the ancestral teachings of the 3 sacred lands, but no one knows where they came from. I really don't know where these terrifying beings came from. Lu Feng knew about the origin of this demonic creature. In the memories of the primordial immortal demon era, the demons had been mentioned. These demons were not only the greatest enemies of this place, but also the evil that had caused the collapse of the immortal race in the primordial immortal demon era. However, Lu Feng wouldn't say this out loud. Demonic creatures have existed since the most primitive era of the Great Desolate Era. At that time, they were incomparably terrifying. The 9 Hells Sunken Land is the deepest part of this place. Legend has it that although the 14 great continents are suspended above the chaotic Star Sea, the 9 Hells Sunken Land is located deep beneath them. These 9 Hells Sunken Land are even connected. Therefore, the plan to form an alliance and clear out the 9 Hells Sunken Land one by one has all failed. The eternal immortal lord's eyes shone with helplessness. they had also wanted to get rid of this calamity. Unfortunately, every attempt had ended in failure. This was a great deal of helplessness. Lu Feng remained silent. This was not something he could participate in right now. Perhaps it was because no one had come here for a long time, but the eternal immortal Lord seemed particularly talkative. During this time, Lu Feng also learned a lot of things, including many secrets about this place. Before he knew it, the two of them had already exchanged countless words. When they talked about the young heroes, the eternal immortal Lord suddenly fell silent. This was because he had once been a young hero as well. He had even been called an unparalleled genius. However, compared to the young man before him, he was far, far inferior. The eternal immortal Lord stared at Lu Feng for a long time before finally speaking. Lu Feng, I know that you must have countless secrets. After all, there has never been a heaven-defying genius like you in all of history. Even in the primordial immortal devil era, this has never happened. I've seen the 5 ultimate kings before. In the past, they had appeared in the end ancient era. At that time, we were already shocked by the monstrous level of the 5 ultimate kings. However, in this era, I have discovered that the 5 ultimate kings are not the true limit. Before you, I used to think that he was the most heaven-defying existence. However, after meeting you, I realized that it is possible to be heaven-defying to such an extent. That's right, he was born in this era. His surname is also Lu, the same as yours. If not for the fact that I could not sense the bloodline connection between the two of you, I would have thought that the two of you had inherited the same bloodline. At this point, the eternal immortal master smiled faintly. Although Lu Feng could break the restriction and enter the Emperor's domain to become a peak immortal king, the eternal immortal Lord was a primordial immortal venerable. He could naturally sense that Lu Feng had nothing to do with the heaven-defying genius that had appeared before. Lu Feng fell silent for a moment when he saw the eternal immortal master's smile. Then, he sighed and asked slowly, "What do you think?" "The person you are talking about is his name." Liu Bei, the eternal immortal Lord, was taken aback when he heard the name. However, after a moment, he chuckled and nodded. "That's right. His name is Liu Bei. However, it is only right that you know about him. After all, you know a secret that only the 3 Holy Lands know about. It is only right that you know about the heaven-defying genius Liu Bei as well." Lu Feng remained silent. He looked at the chuckling eternal immortal Lord and spoke again. "Liu Bei's surname is Liu. My surname is Liu as well. We are indeed related. Liu Bei is actually my progenitor." The eternal immortal Lord's smile froze when he heard Lu Feng's words. He looked at Lu Feng with an incomparably complicated expression. Lu Feng knew why the eternal immortal Lord had such a look on his face. He could only smile helplessly. "My progenitor actually became a sovereign in his final moment. He became a supreme sovereign on the same level as the holy masters of the immortal demon Holy Lands in the immortal demon era." Lu Feng could see the eternal immortal Lord's frozen eyes. Indeed, such a shock was truly too great, and it was great to the point he was unable to endure it. Chapter 860. After a long time, eternal immortal master finally awoke from his endless silence. He looked at Lu Feng, his eyes filled with complex emotions. "I didn't expect him to reach that step. He really became such a great being." Sighs. Endless sighs. "I thought that the Emperor would be the one most likely to reach that level. After all, he is a pure immortal, and not long ago, he became a supreme immortal emperor. He was just one step away from breaking through the last shackle to shatter the power of the 33 layers of ultimate heaven and become a true supreme ruler." Although Liu Bei's performance was even more terrifying than that of an immortal king, he was only born in this era. In terms of foundation, he really couldn't compare to an immortal king. But I didn't expect him to succeed. He became the first supreme ruler since the end of the primordial immortal devil era. Lu Feng could understand this point as well. After all, although Liu Bei was incomparably heaven-defying, compared to the 5 taboo kings, his accumulation was far too lacking. The 5 taboo kings all traveled through time and space, and they were all born in different eras and epochs. In this second universe, they appeared from the 4 barren lands and 6 ancient eras to plunder the fortunes of their eras. It was the same in the original universe. Whenever there was a shocking era, they would awaken and go to battle to obtain the fortunes of their eras. Their experience in battle after battle was indescribable, and their accumulation of power was unprecedented. In addition to their accumulation in the primordial immortal devil era, their power was truly terrifying. And compared to them, the human king was not just a little bit weaker. After all, the human king was born in this era, and he didn't have such a rich accumulation. It could be said that his real fighting time was completed in those few hundred years. However, such a sovereign personage had succeeded. He had actually done the right thing at the wrong time. This undoubtedly showed the terror of the human king. The human king was the most heaven-defying. My ancestor, titled human king, was the only one who used his own power to force his way into the ranks of the taboo kings. Therefore, when it comes to the degree of heaven-defying, my progenitor human monarch is the number 1 person in the endless time and space. Lu Feng was speaking from the bottom of his heart because even he, Lu Feng, couldn't compare to the primogenitor human monarch. Although his current battle prowess represented that he was invincible at this level since ancient times. In fact, many of the things he had done had already surpassed the human kings. However, he was still lacking in comparison. He was still lacking in comparison to a human king. My ability to defy the heavens is built on the foundation of countless shocking secrets. My ability to defy the heavens is based on the accumulation of countless things. Compared to a sovereign personage, I am truly inferior, far inferior. Lu Feng sighed and finally spoke the words in his heart. Although the majority of his achievements were due to his own hard work and crazy willpower, he was still unable to shake off the existence of Futu. Moreover, the reason why he was able to be so heaven-defying in the early stages was because of the human king's bloodline. If it hadn't been for the human king's bloodline, his invincibility in the early stages would have ended. Therefore, Lu Feng felt that he still couldn't compare to a human monarch. The eternal immortal master shook his head when he saw Lu Feng's slightly downcast attitude. You are wrong. What you're thinking is really wrong. You're very wrong. Your progenitor's ability to defy the heavens is indeed shocking. However, you were not able to reach your current level purely because of his abilities. You may have relied on countless secrets to reach your current level. However, isn't Liu Bei the same? There are many things that can no longer be explained simply by talent. Did he not have any secrets to reach his current level at such a young age? He is the same as you. In fact, his incomparable ability to defy the heavens was built on the foundation of countless secrets. Lu Feng was slightly taken aback. In the next moment, he looked at the eternal immortal master and saw the eternal immortal master's smiling face. He nodded slightly at Lu Feng. As for Lu Feng, after a brief moment of silence, he finally understood. He smiled softly and said, "I was wrong." It was a simple 5 words, but Lu Feng had already understood it. The eternal immortal master nodded slightly. In the next moment, he looked behind him at the illusory figure of the Empyrean Futu. After a long time, it finally spoke. Lu Feng, you took such a huge risk to come here. It must be for this. At this moment, Lu Feng's heart finally began to tremble. His ultimate goal in coming here was not to meet the eternal immortal master, nor was it to see these so-called demons. His true goal was the existence of the Empyrean Futu, the Empyrean Futu. Therefore, when the eternal immortal master said these words, Lu Feng nodded without hesitation. Can you tell me what this existence is? The eternal immortal master did not turn his head. He looked at the enormous Empyrean Futu quietly, as if he was thinking about something. Lu Feng did not say anything either. Finally, after a long time, the eternal immortal master slowly turned his head. Lu Feng, do you know what the ultimate level of an artifact is? Lu Feng was slightly taken aback, but still nodded. I know. It should be a third-grade one, the eternal immortal master nodded. A 10th-grade immortal artifact corresponds to an immortal king. An 11th-grade divine artifact corresponds to the age immortal venerable. A 12th-grade divine artifact corresponds to the epoch immortal venerable. But according to legend, a 12th-grade divine artifact is not the limit. Above it, there is a 13th-grade divine artifact, which can rule an entire era. It can challenge the cycle of reincarnation and even the origin of the universe. It is the ultimate emperor artifact. Lu Feng was speechless. He knew in the future. He knew very well that in the era of desolation, the truly invincible artifact, which had been refined by an entire era, was the ultimate emperor artifact. Unfortunately, when the great wilderness totem had been born, it had encountered the sacred monument, which had ignited a great calamity in the universe. Unfortunately, it had been knocked down from the ultimate emperor artifact level. But at its peak it had really been a 13th-grade divine artifact. Of course, besides the great wilderness totem, Lu Feng also knew about the Lu family's human emperor palace. Although the human emperor palace was only a 12th-grade divine artifact, it was definitely comparable to an ultimate emperor artifact when it came to resisting calamities. Therefore, Lu Feng could understand and believe the eternal immortal master's word. So you mean that this Futu is the ultimate 13th-grade emperor artifact? The eternal immortal master looked at Lu Feng and shook his head with a smile. You are wrong. Really wrong. The existence of a Buddha can no longer be described with just a grade. A 13th-grade emperor artifact is equivalent to an unparalleled sovereign artifact. It was the same level as your ancestor, Liu Bei, in the primordial immortal and devil era. But the existence of Fu Tu has already surpassed them. If you really want to add a grade, then it should be a 14th-grade artifact. Lu Feng was dumbfounded. His mind was in a mess. He looked at the eternal immortal master, unable to believe what he had just heard. 14th grade, 14th grade? The eternal immortal master's smile had faded. He nodded solemnly. From the beginning of the primordial chaos to the present era, throughout the endless years, this is the only 14th-grade artifact that has surpassed the unparalleled sovereign realm. It is Futu. So what is the origin of Futu? What is its origin? Lu Feng was impatient, extremely impatient. But the eternal immortal master did not seem to notice Lu Feng's impatience. He remained silent, then finally shook his head. I cannot tell you. Although I do know some of it, it's a pity that I'm unable to speak of it. Lu Feng was taken aback. But in the next moment, he seemed to understand something. With a bitter smile, Lu Feng nodded gently. Some existences can't even be recorded in history. Similarly, their existences can't even be described. As for the heavenly stupa, which is also the stupa you speak of, it should be such an existence. The eternal immortal master was silent for a moment, then nodded gently. The existence of Buddha represents a kind of realm, and even surpasses any kind of law or principle. You can only know its secrets, but you can't speak of them. It can't even carry anything. As for what I know, I only managed to comprehend it after going through countless small reincarnations in this place. Lu Feng did not ask any more questions. At this moment, he was really disappointed. He had thought that he would be able to uncover the secrets of the heavenly Futu, but in the end, he did not know anything. Of course, Lu Feng couldn't say that he didn't know anything. At the very least, He knew that the existence of the Babel Stupa was beyond the limit of items and creatures in the legends. It was a 13th or 14th rank item. This was the only bit of information he knew. Vaguely, Lu Feng thought of an existence. It was the legendary he, who was not even qualified to be recorded in history. According to what those people had said, he should be a terrifying existence that surpassed the Sovereign Lord. He should be on the same level as the Heavenly Sovereign. Lu Feng looked at the huge projection of Futu. Then, he walked slowly until he was in front of Futu. At this moment, the calling was even more intense. Finally, Lu Feng summoned his martial path avatar. Lu Feng's martial path avatar was condensed using the heavenly Futu in his consciousness space as a blueprint. Speaking of which, his martial path avatar was more similar to the projection of the heavenly Futu. After summoning his martial path avatar, Lu Feng instantly felt the most thorough calling. It was a strong calling that Lu Feng could not ignore no matter what. In the next moment, Lu Feng's mind went completely blank. As for his arm, it slowly moved. The heavenly Futu's martial path avatar moved slowly along with Lu Feng's arm. Finally, when Lu Feng's arm touched the projection of the Futu, Lu Feng's martial path avatar completely entered the projection. They had actually fused. The eternal immortal master's eyes shone with astonishment at the sight before him. Given his status as an epic immortal venerable, he wouldn't be shocked by anything. But now, when he saw the scene before him, he could not help but be shocked. Because he truly understood the terrifying greatness of this Futu. Anything that had anything to do with Futu was bound to be horrifying and unexplainable. And now, in his eyes, Lu Feng's martial path avatar had actually fused with Futu. Chapter 861. He quietly sank into the world of power. Lu Feng knew exactly what was happening, but all he could do was watch. He could only watch in silence. For some reason, Lu Feng didn't feel the slightest bit of anxiety in his heart. Perhaps Lu Feng believed that the Tongtian Futu would never harm him. Lu Feng closed his eyes and quietly sensed the changes. He sensed the strange changes. Both Lu Feng and the eternal immortal master had strange expressions on their faces. However, these two kinds of abnormalities were different. Lu Feng's strange behavior was a kind of enjoyment, a kind of excitement. The eternal immortal master's expression was one of embarrassment and helplessness. It was a twisted expression. The eternal immortal master looked at Lu Feng, who was shrouded in the endless light. He looked at Lu Feng, who had become one with the Futu. Finally, the eternal immortal master put away all the strange expressions on his face. He looked at Lu Feng's figure for a long time. Finally, he smiled. I have existed for a long time. This time, since you have appeared. Since you have been summoned by the Futu. Then this proves that your existence is a terror chosen by the Futu. You are destined to become our hope. I will try my best once more. I hope that you will be able to complete all your transformations within the time that I am trying my best to endure. You will be able to truly reach that step and help us completely eliminate this biggest tumor. Lu Feng's eyes were still closed. He was still quietly absorbing. Time passed slowly. Finally, after an indeterminate amount of time, Lu Feng slowly opened his eyes. Lu Feng was speechless. It was an indescribable feeling. The moment he opened his eyes, he understood what had happened. My martial path incarnation, the Tongtian Futu, has already reached the 10th level, rank 10. Lu Feng's martial arts avatar had reached rank 10 silence. At this moment, Lu Feng was really silent. He didn't know how to describe the shock in his heart. Actually, when my physical body became the sacred truth body, it was already at the level 10 level. But my level is too low. I can't condense the existence of truth into my body. So, although my body has become a truth holy body, it is still at the level of level 9. The reason the sacred truth body was called the sacred truth body was because the existence of truth had been condensed within the body. This allowed the body to wield the power of power there. This was also the reason why the sacred truth physique could be enhanced. However, Lu Feng now only had the torso of the sacred truth body. He didn't have the truth of the sacred truth body. Therefore, he was still 9 times stronger than when he had condensed the supreme godly body. Regardless of whether he was at his peak, he was still 9 times stronger. Originally, according to my thoughts and guesses, after I walk out of here, my physical body will be the first of the 3 to enter the 10th grade realm. But now, it seems like… Lu Feng wanted to laugh, but he really couldn't. This was because Lu Feng realized that the shock this time was really too great. In the past, my martial path incarnation was only at the level 7 level. At most, it was at the level 9 level. But this time, just this alone allowed my martial path incarnation to advance from the level 7 level to the level 10 level. Of course, compared to the increase in level, this increase in level is nothing. Although the amount of resources needed to improve his martial path incarnation was definitely astronomical. In terms of astronomy, there were also some. However, it was really too difficult to improve his level. This could only be done by opening the first level of the sky-piercing Fudu. But now, before he could open the 5th level of the sky-piercing Fudu, he had relied on this harvest to forcibly raise his martial path incarnation to the level 10 level. How could Lu Feng not be shocked? This time, I actually received such a huge protection. Really, this is… Lu Feng shook his head slightly, but didn't say anything. In the end, he just smiled faintly and said nothing. Turning around, Lu Feng looked at the figure who had been quietly watching him. His face was full of awkwardness. Eternal Immortal Master, this time Lu Feng wanted to explain, but the Eternal Immortal Master waved his hand lightly. Actually, you don't need to explain. All of this is fate's arrangement. It was fated to happen. I'm afraid that the reason I was able to summon the shadow of Futu back then was not because Futu wanted to come here to suppress these demons, but because it wanted to wait for you. Now, you've completely absorbed and fused with it. Everything is as planned. In that case, why should I blame you? Just a moment ago, Lu Feng had completely merged with the illusory figure, leaving not a single trace of it behind. The shadow of Futu existed to suppress these demons, but Lu Feng had absorbed it. Then, Lu Feng looked at the Eternal Immortal Master, speechless. The Eternal Immortal Master looked at Lu Feng and smiled faintly. Lu Feng, you don't have to worry too much. Of course, you can't relax either. You can leave without worry. However, I hope that one day in the future, when you are strong enough, you can return to this place and suppress all the demonic creatures that endanger the lives of countless living beings in the depths of this place. Before that, I will guard this place for you. I will help you suppress these monsters. Lu Feng looked at the Eternal Immortal Master. He wanted to say something, but he realized that anything he said would be futile. The only thing he could do at this moment was to nod his head vigorously. I, Lu Feng, promise that one day in the future, when my strength is sufficient, I will definitely return here and completely suppress these demonic creatures that endanger countless lives. Even without the Eternal Immortal Master's help, Lu Feng would return to this place one day and annihilate all of these demonic creatures. Lu Feng knew that these demons had to die, because he had seen the horrors of the primordial immortal devil era. The Eternal Immortal Master smiled faintly when he saw Lu Feng's solemn expression. He knew that once someone like Lu Feng made a promise, he would see it through no matter what. He was not worried about that. Here, you've already absorbed all of the Buddha's phenomena. I will continue to guard this place for you for a certain period of time. But my strength is limited, so I won't be able to stay here for long. Lu Feng, you must hurry. If the seal here disappeared, Then the seal that led to the 9 nether-sunken land in the depths of the earth would also disappear completely. When the demonic creatures appear, it will be a true apocalyptic calamity for the entire space. Lu Feng nodded deeply when he saw the eternal immortal master's solemn expression. After absorbing Fuda's shadow and turning it into his own power, he was now responsible for everything that had happened. As for Lu Feng, he would never shirk his responsibilities. All right. There's nothing left for you to look forward to. Lu Feng, you may leave. I hope that the next time I see you, it will be when you return and sweep everything away. With a casual wave of his hand, he tore through the void. In the past, Fuda's shadow had been the guardian of this sealed space. All the laws had been set by Fuda itself. Even someone as powerful as the epic immortal Venerate had been unable to do anything about it. But things were different now. The guardian had become the eternal immortal master, and he was the one who governed the laws and laws. Naturally, tearing through the void and leading Lu Feng away was a piece of cake. Lu Feng didn't leave immediately when he saw the void crack leading to the outside world. Instead, he bowed respectfully to the eternal immortal master before finally turning around. The eternal immortal master was indeed someone worthy of Lu Feng's respect. Alone, he had guarded this desolate sealed land for countless years. He had chosen to sacrifice himself for the sake of world peace. Such greatness was worthy of Lu Feng's respect. Finally, he turned and walked into the crack. Lu Feng's figure completely vanished. Lu Feng is indeed unparalleled. Theoretically speaking, the Emperor's domain can be shattered at any time. However, only a few have been able to enter the Emperor's domain since ancient times. Although they were all epic immortal venerates, those epic immortal venerates were invincible. They were epic immortal venerates who had entered the ultimate heaven of the 33 layers. They were all perfected golden immortals, or even chaotic golden immortals before they could enter. The moment Lu Feng disappeared, a figure appeared beside where he had been standing. If Lu Feng had been here, he might have remembered this figure, but he definitely wouldn't have been able to recognize him. This was because Lu Feng had once felt traces of his existence in the true massacre abyss. He was one of the 5 figures who had been able to reach the end of this epic and see the true secrets. He was the first immortal emperor since ancient times. He was also the emperor who had saved Lu Feng by using the Grade 13 Ultimate Imperial Pill to save Lu Feng. At this moment, he had also appeared in the sealed land. However, the eternal immortal master wasn't the least bit shocked by his appearance. After hearing his words, the eternal immortal master only smiled faintly. Yes, this is too terrifying. Anyone who can shatter the Emperor's domain, even if they are just epic immortal venerates, will have heaven-defying battle strength. They can easily suppress countless epic immortal venerates. They are the most powerful immortal venerates below the supreme ruler. Moreover, this Emperor's domain is quite unique. If one can win the Battle of the Kings, then there is a chance to shatter it. Of course, there are strict limits to how many victories one can accumulate. Even so, it is still possible to enter this domain in the early stages. But who would have thought that Lu Feng would actually do it? He really did what was theoretically possible. He is truly heaven-defying. He is even more heaven-defying than you and Liu Bei. The Emperor smiled faintly and didn't deny it. He had once been one of the greatest beings in the entire universe, and had been recognized as the most talented being in the world. But now, after hearing these words, he only smiled and faced them. The Emperor knew that the eternal immortal master was right. One Liu Bei, one Lu Feng. This Liu family is truly heaven-defying. The Emperor sighed softly. However, he seemed to have thought of something in the next moment. The Emperor looked at the eternal immortal master. After a moment of hesitation, he asked slowly, "Why don't you tell him?" The eternal immortal master smiled faintly and shook his head. However, his eyes were filled with determination. "Tell him what?" Tell him that my spirit, my life, and my soul have already fused with Buddha's shadow? Tell him that when he absorbs the phantoms of the Buddha, it's the same as taking my life. The emperor fell silent. When he had first seen Lu Feng absorb Buddha's shadow, he had wanted to intervene and stop him. After all, absorbing the existence of the Buddha's silhouette would only speed up Lu Feng's progress a little. However, this would require the life of the eternal immortal master, a great immortal master who had sacrificed his entire life for the sake of countless lives. However, he had been stopped at the last moment. The eternal immortal master had stopped him completely. I have reached my limit. After so many years of guarding, I have lost the strength of the first sacred master. My battle strength was once at the level of the 32 levels of heaven. I could look down on countless experts since ancient times. I was only slightly weaker than you ultimate overlords. At that time I was indeed very proud. After all, I was the first immortal master after the end of the primordial immortal demon. A trace of pride appeared on the eternal immortal master's face as he spoke. The first immortal master after the primordial immortal demon. That was indeed something to be proud of. However, that was the past. That is the past. My limit in this life is the 32 heavens, and the combat strength of the 32 heavens really isn't much. It really isn't of much help to the countless living beings in this world. Therefore, I am willing to sacrifice myself to help Lu Feng. I want him to grow as quickly as possible. I want him to become the greatest being, and I want him to solve all future problems. Chapter 862. In that moment, the eternal immortal master's eyes shone with a majestic light. Even the emperor felt his soul being subdued by that light. He was an emperor, an eternal god emperor, someone with the battle strength of the ultimate heaven of the 33rd layer. But when facing an existence with the battle strength of the ultimate heaven of the 32nd layer, when facing a decaying immortal venerable who had lost all of his strength, essence, spirit, and even life, he was actually subdued, even trembling. It was inconceivable, but at the same time, reasonable. This is a form of faith. A faith that is willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of billions of lives. The emperor sighed softly as he looked at the eternal immortal master. He did not use any strength to resist this subjugation. Instead, he chose to remain silent and submerge himself in his faith. The light in his eyes grew more and more striking, more and more dazzling. The eternal immortal master smiled. He looked at the endless demonic creatures around him and smiled brilliantly. My life has come to an end. I should have died the moment Lu Feng left. But I still have a responsibility. I still have to help Lu Feng suppress this place. What should I do? What should I do? He seemed to be talking to the emperor, but also seemed to be muttering to himself. When the emperor saw the eternal immortal master's state, all he could do was sigh. He knew what the eternal immortal master was going to do from the start. Have you really made up your mind? The emperor couldn't help but ask. He really didn't want to see this happen. The eternal immortal master looked at the emperor, still smiling. It was that smile that made the emperor's eyes shine with an indescribable light. He didn't dare look at the eternal immortal master. Instead, he slowly lowered his head. Jingling, don't tell me that you still don't understand. The emperor's body trembled slightly. Pure spirit. What a distant word. What a strange word. However, these two words were so familiar to him. Jingling was the emperor's name. The emperor vaguely remembered everything he had said. He had said that from now on, he would no longer call him Jingling. Because you have grown up. You are the emperor. You have been the protector of countless lives for your entire life, but now, he opened his mouth once again and called out his name once more. The emperor's body trembled more and more violently. Finally, he slowly bent over. Master, please reconsider. Master, the eternal immortal master was the greatest of his time in the end era. For some reason, the emperor of his time lost his memories. He became the eternal immortal master's only disciple. The 5 great taboo kings did not have any teachers in their lives, except for the emperor and his time in the end of ancient times. The light in the eternal immortal master's eyes grew even brighter when he heard the word master. A eternal immortal master's pride, immortal master. However, that expression disappeared in the blink of an eye and was replaced by determination, an incomparable determination. No need to reconsider. Now there was no other way. For the eternal immortal masters, I can endure the endless and eternal torture of billions of space-time. Remember jingling. You are the emperor. Before Lu Feng achieved unparalleled greatness, you were the greatest existence in this space left behind. You must protect everyone. Remember, don't forget your responsibility. The eternal immortal master's entire body began to burn as he spoke. He had gone completely berserk. The emperor reached out his arm. If he had intervened, he could have stopped everything. But he did not intervene. A tear fell from his eye. The emperor was crying. The emperor looked at the burning figure and slowly turned around. He really did not want to see what was going to happen next. He really could not see it. He really did not want to see it. He could hear the eternal immortal master's frenzied cries behind him. He could feel the violent vibrations in the air. The emperor hid the sorrow in his eyes. The pain in his eyes gradually faded away. The emperor exhaled softly. There was only one color left in his eyes, and that was determination. Master, I remember my promise. I will always remember it. His roar echoed throughout the sealed land. The eternal immortal master smiled as he watched the emperor disappear. Suddenly, he remembered something from the past, something that had happened a long, long time ago. Back then, the emperor had only been jingling. He had only been his disciple. The eternal immortal master's power went berserk as he looked at the demonic creatures that were about to come back to life. I promise to help you guard this place for a period of time. It will be 100,000 years. Lu Feng, you must succeed in 100,000 years. You must return and destroy the final obstacle. His eyes flashed with determination. Although my life is gone, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be annihilated. I am the epic immortal master. My battle strength has reached the 32nd level of heaven. I am the true legend of the Emperor Tao. I am the strongest immortal master below the heaven-defying immortal masters. Even in the primordial immortal and devil era, I was the greatest being. So this time, let me defy immortal masters once more. My life is gone. It's not enough. Am I going to die soon? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Because I can still do it. I can still do it. Because I can still go even crazier. The eternal immortal master's voice rang out in the sealed land. It shook the inheritance and lasted for a long time. I, the eternal immortal master, am here. I will borrow another 100,000 years from the heavens. Lu Feng had spent a total of 10 years to enter this place, including the time he had spent cultivating. But it had only taken him a moment to leave this place. Really, it had only been a moment. Lu Feng knew that even if he used the mystique of the Divine King's forbidden mythological domain, it would still take him some time to leave this place. However, it was impossible for him to leave like he was doing now. Lu Feng walked out of the crack in the void. He was at a loss. He was really at a loss. This was because he realized that he was currently in an incomparably vast and terrifying plaza. At this moment, there were two young existences clashing madly in this square. When Lu Feng arrived, the clash stopped temporarily. Everyone turned to look at Lu Feng. In the next moment, Lu Feng finally understood what was going on. His expression changed slightly. When he had entered the sealed land, he had entered through the sacred gate of the Imperial Azure Empire. Based on his previous logic, Lu Feng should have left the Imperial Azure Empire when he left. But he had forgotten that the eternal immortal master had sent him out by tearing the void apart. There was no way the eternal immortal master would allow him to remain underground. He must have sent Lu Feng to the surface. If he had appeared in any other place, even if it was a barren mountain, Lu Feng would not have reacted strangely. But the place he had appeared in now was a little too unnatural. Lu Feng could see that there was a competition going on here. It was probably a grand competition. This could be seen from the fact that there were only 2 people on the vast battle platform and from the countless spectators around them. After a quick glance, Lu Feng realized how powerful the 2 people on the stage were. They were king-level monsters. Both of them were king-level monsters at the Void Immortal Realm. In an instant, Lu Feng thought of something. He understood that the place he had arrived at was probably some sex competition venue. Moreover, Lu Feng believed that the existence of this sect was definitely not inferior to a king-level force. Otherwise, there would not be 2 king-level monstrous geniuses. Lu Feng fell silent as he looked at the terrifying heavenly immortal realm existences who had appeared beside him. After a while, he could only smile awkwardly. However, just as Lu Feng was about to explain, there was an earth-shattering change in the void. Everyone looked up in horror. For the existences in the second universe, what they feared the most was the calamity of the heavens and earth. Obviously, the scene that appeared at this moment was very similar to the terrifying calamity of the heavens and earth. Seeing this, the heavenly immortals' expressions changed drastically. Their figures disappeared in an instant and appeared in the void, outside of the endless dark clouds that covered everything. Below the fighting ring, countless spectators and experts were bewildered. They really didn't know how things had turned out this way. Just now, it was clearly the moment when the 2 king-level monsters clashed for the last time. They were about to decide who was the #1 monster in the Moonhowl sect. However, at this moment, an inexplicable existence walked out of the void. Before these people could react, this inexplicable existence had even summoned the heavenly tribulation. This was completely unimaginable, and they could not understand it. Bewilderment, truly endless bewilderment. In the void, an area had been cleared, and Lu Feng stood quietly in the void, alone. At this moment, Lu Feng's eyes were filled with confusion. This was because he also felt that this heavenly tribulation was strange. However, soon, the confusion in Lu Feng's eyes became more obvious because he felt, what is going on?" He frowned slightly, and there was a strong sense of confusion in his eyes. Unlike those powerful heavenly tribulations, the heavenly tribulation that appeared this time, although he could not see how terrifying it was, Lu Feng could not feel any threat from it. He could not feel any strong sense of obliteration that belonged to the heavenly tribulation. This made Lu Feng very confused, very confused. Chapter 863. Up until now, he had experienced a lot of disasters, including the fourfold annihilation, which was the first disaster in history. However, none of those disasters were similar to the one in front of him. All the previous calamities had given Lu Feng a strong sense of death. However, this calamity didn't have any dangerous aura at all. Silence. Endless silence. After a while, Lu Feng thought of something. He really thought of something. So, that's how it is. Becoming a god meant that after becoming an immortal, there would be no disasters. Unless one committed a disaster that went against the laws of the origin, it would be impossible for there to be any disasters. Hence, what appeared now should not be a heaven's test. In addition, Lu Feng could not sense any threat from it. Hence, Lu Feng was sure that this should be the legend he had heard of in the past. In the original universe, there is such a legend. No, it is not a legend because it is the truth. Any existence who has the potential to become a supreme divine king will be able to create a vision of heaven and earth when they break through and become a god. For those who have the potential to become a divine king, that is, a supreme king, the origin of the universe will give birth to a truly shocking vision. In this era, all the powers of the origin will choose to bestow blessings to those who break through. They will bestow upon those who break through and become stronger. This kind of enhancement will be the domain that the Supreme King is most likely to break through. Among the three great domains, it is the power that is closest to the Divine King's forbidden domain. This was a gift from the space-time era. Back then, when Lu Tao became a Supreme King and became a god, the sky bestowed the gift of the origin. It was a gift that belonged to the physical body domain, and it could raise Lu Tao's power by one level. But just as Lu Tao was about to get it, Pluto Alpha made a move across countless dimensions. His path to becoming the Divine King was broken. If it wasn't for the fact that Lu Tao was truly incomparably monstrous and heaven-defying, actually finding the secret of the Divine King from the ancient Divine King and restarting the path of the Divine King, perhaps he would have been like this for the rest of his life and would have stopped at the peak of the virtual king level. At most, he would only be an alien supreme. My father is in the fleshly body domain. What about me? What am I? There was an indescribable color in his eyes. Lu Feng's eyes were filled with complicated emotions. There was waiting, indifference, laughter, playfulness, and many other things. However, there was none of them, and that was excitement. Lu Feng didn't seem to be the least bit excited about the upcoming boost in the void. The area that seemed to be covered by the tribulation cloud was getting bigger and bigger. In the beginning, it only covered some areas around Lu Feng. However, as time passed, the area covered grew bigger and bigger. In just a short while, it actually covered the entire battle stage. And this was still not the end, it still wasn't over. Because the area that seemed to be covered by the tribulation was still expanding, and it continued to expand infinitely. Countless existences were already in turmoil, and they all left their seat. Many of the weaker ones panicked and started to leave. Those who lived in the second universe all understood that the terror of the tribulation was absolutely indescribable. Even if it was an ordinary tribulation, once one got involved, it would trigger one's own tribulation. It could be said that seeing the birth of the tribulation, unless one was strong enough to suppress everything, one would run as far as possible. Clearly, there were many existences with enough strength this time. Therefore, although many people ran out, there were still many who stayed to watch. Just like this, an extremely strange scene appeared. That was, Lu Feng's gaze was calm as he stood in the void above the battle stage, in the core square that belonged to the Moonhowl sect. And around him there were actually people looking at him in a daze. Their gazes were serious and full of solemnity. Lu Feng looked at the tribulation that was about to descend in the void and slowly recovered his calm expression. Finally, gradually, some people realized that something was wrong. Something was completely wrong. They already felt that the tribulation cloud above Lu Feng didn't seem to be what they imagined. Because if it was really a tribulation, then not to mention that it should descend with destructive power now, it should at least show some signs of it. However, in these people's perception, the tribulation cloud in the sky didn't give birth to any destructive power at all. It only had that kind of appearance, with an incomparably terrifying power, but it didn't produce any threatening aura at all. This made many existences at a loss. Looking at each other, there was finally a sky immortal level existence who frowned. What is going on? Many people were also filled with doubt. Looking at each other, they all hoped that each other could answer their doubt. But unfortunately, those existences here were all at a loss. I wonder which Emperor-level force nurtured this young master to be such a monstrous genius. He actually came to our Moonhowl sect to receive the gift of time and space. Just as everyone was puzzled, a voice suddenly rang in the void. The moment they heard this voice, everyone was slightly stunned. They looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. They knew the owner of the voice, and it was incomparably familiar. That was their Moonhowl Sect's Lord sect leader. Legend had it that the Moonhowl Sect's Lord had already stepped into the peak of the Hunyuan Golden Immortal level and was an invincible existence below the Immortal King level. The moment their Lord sect leader became an Immortal King, their Moonhowl sect would be able to become an Emperor-level force and obtain more resources. Therefore, the Moonhowl sect's Lord was incomparably important in the hearts of many existences in the Moonhowl sect. What he said was the truth, it was a theorem. But now, he said that the mysterious young man in front of them was a monstrous genius nurtured by an Emperor-level force? Moreover, he was now receiving the gift of time and space. The gift of time and space? Perhaps those ordinary existences would not understand what this was, but as heavenly immortal-level existences, how could they not know? This meant that when an immortal king-level existence became a god, the gift of time and space would be bestowed upon them. To be able to receive this gift of time and space proved that in the future, as long as they did not fall and continued to cultivate, they would definitely be able to become at least an immortal king and have the terrifying potential to become an immortal venerable. The Moonhowl sect's Lord's words undoubtedly proved that the young man in the sky was actually an Emperor-level monstrous genius. How could this not shock anyone? Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at Lu Feng in horror. However, Lu Feng did not seem to notice any of this. He just quietly floated in the void, staring at the extremely dense dark clouds in the sky. Finally, after waiting for an unknown amount of time, the dark clouds changed. As expected, it's the gift of time and space. Many people's expressions were incomparably complicated. Although they had not personally seen the gift of time and space, they had all heard of the gift of time and space. These people naturally knew that the scene in front of them was the moment the gift of time and space appeared. It seemed to confirm the thoughts in their hearts. Amidst the endless void, amidst the dark clouds, a blinding radiance suddenly appeared. It was indescribable. That kind of brilliance covered everything, nothing could compare to it. From the light, everyone felt a kind of power descending. At this moment, in the face of the majesty of the power in the golden light, all existence's faces turned pale. In an instant, they could only submit and land on the ground. This is the majesty of time and space, the majesty of all laws and the origin of power. In front of it, no existence is qualified to fly, to be on the same level as it. Gently exhaling, the Moonhowl sect's Lord's eyes flashed with a trace of nostalgia. This young man is really too terrifying. Just now I made a mistake. The surrounding people looked at the sect lord with slight confusion, and after feeling these people's gazes, the Moonhowl sect's lord only smiled, but there was still a kind of unconcealable shock in his smile. This young man, he is not a peak monstrous genius cultivated by an emperor-level force. He should be a shocking monstrous genius cultivated by an emperor-level force. The surrounding heavenly immortals were all stunned. They looked at the Moonhowl sect's lord, completely shocked. Emperor-level force. Could it be that he is actually, the Moonhowl sect's lord nodded gently. There was an incomparably heavy color in his expression. That's right, he is indeed an emperor-level monstrous genius. When the emperor-level monstrous genius accepted the gift of time and space, I also saw it with my own eyes. In fact, strictly speaking, the emperor-level monstrous genius is not necessarily an immortal king existence. Not all of them can accept the gift of time and space. Among the monstrous geniuses, only the emperor-level monstrous geniuses are definitely an immortal king existence. The emperor-level monstrous genius that I once saw was the young sect master of the vast sea sect. He was an emperor-level monstrous genius, and he should be the peak existence among the emperor-level monstrous geniuses. But the scene that appeared when he accepted the gift of time and space, compared to this young man, was incalculable. There was no need to say the rest. Even the peak emperor-level monstrous genius was far from comparable to the present. Then this proved that the monstrous genius in front of them was an existence that surpassed the emperor-level monstrous genius. He should be a true emperor-level monstrous genius! Exclamation. It could no longer be described as exclamation. All these people could do was to look up at the void, at Lu Feng, who was receiving the golden light, feeling the aura in the golden light, the kind of information that it brought. Lu Feng smiled gently. Everything was the same as he thought, there was no difference. And as Lu Feng expected, this descending was indeed the origin power of the martial Tao incarnation. Among his three major domains, although the cultivation technique domain was the one that he was most confident in, it was actually Lu Feng's weakest domain. As for the second domain, the physical body domain, although he had already condensed the truth saint body, until now, he had not condensed the truth in it, so this physical body was still 9 times stronger. As for the martial Tao incarnation mythical domain, that was Lu Feng's peak domain so far. Chapter 864. With the help of Futu, Lu Feng's martial path avatar had not only reached the 10th grade, but it had also reached the 10th grade. Therefore, his martial path avatar's domain was the pinnacle of the domain. Lu Feng smiled as he looked at the gift that descended from the void. The existences of the Moon Howl sect below him all revealed a trace of understanding expression. I didn't expect this monster's pinnacle to be the immortal demon phenomenon. However, to be honest, this is indeed one of the easiest phenomenons to break through. After all, this thing is innate. Everyone slightly relaxed. However, they did not notice that the sect master of the Moonhowl sect had an incomparably ugly expression at this moment. How is this possible? His voice was filled with shock and disbelief. The surrounding Moonhowl sect disciples were horrified. They looked in one direction, in the direction of the Moonhowl sect master. They did not understand why their wise Lord sect master would be so emotional. In the next moment, when they followed the Moonhowl sect master's gaze and looked into the distance, they were completely stunned. How is this possible? Many people were at a loss for words. They stared at the sky in disbelief at the shocking scene that had just unfolded. They were completely dumbfounded. No one knew when it started, but a strange phenomenon had appeared in the void. A golden radiance had appeared once again. Moreover, there were 2 golden radiances this time. Combined with the previous one, there were 3 golden radiances in the sky at this moment. These people naturally knew what the golden radiances meant. 3 golden radiances, this means that he can enter the domain of an immortal king with these 3 domains. Doesn't this mean that he has the potential to become an epic immortal venerate? The appearance of each beam of light represented a kind of blessing of power, which was a kind of domain that was getting closer and closer. All the monstrous geniuses, regardless of whether they are able to trigger the space-time grace in the monarch realm or those monstrous geniuses at the monarch realm, will only receive a single beam of light. But why are there 3 here? Unlike those ordinary existences, the Moonhowl sect master knew everything. He naturally understood that the 3 beams of light represented not only the potential to become an immortal venerate, but also the peak monarch stage monsters who could become immortal venerate. They only received 1 beam of light. The appearance of the 3 beams of light at the same time meant that the young man in the sky would become a divine king in the future. He might even shatter the 3 forbidden domains in one go and become an epic immortal venerate from a peak chaotic origin golden immortal. This was an indescribable emptiness that did not exist. He took a deep breath. His eyes were filled with uneasiness. Looking at the 3 beams of light quietly, Lu Feng understood the meaning behind them. However, he really did not care about it. If it was someone else, they would be extremely excited. However, in the face of this, Lu Feng was so indifferent that he didn't even feel the slightest bit shaken. He just smiled, chuckling softly. 3 forbidden mythological domains? It seems like it's exactly as I thought. As long as I become a divine king supreme, it will inevitably lead to the arrival of the 3 divine king mythological domains. At that time, I can directly become a 3rd-tier divine king supreme, which means I can directly become an epic overlord. This was Lu Feng's reality. It was completely within Lu Feng's expectations, but it was also a reality that made Lu Feng extremely excited. Looking at the 3 forbidden domains in front of him, a hint of hesitation flashed across Lu Feng's eyes. In fact, his current martial path incarnation was already a 10th grade. According to his father, Lu Tao, as long as he took one more step, he would be able to shatter the shackles. The gift of spacetime was to raise a domain by 1 level. In other words, as long as he accepted the gift of spacetime, his martial path incarnation would be able to reach the 11th grade. At that time, it would be like his father's body, entering the divine king forbidden mythological domain. As for the domain of the body, it was the same. If he accepted the gift of spacetime, he would have to achieve a 10th grade body. However, one should not forget that Lu Feng's body was already at the pinnacle of 9th grade. As long as he integrated the truth, he would be able to enter the forbidden domain of the body. My martial path incarnation, together with my techniques and my own combat power, will enter the forbidden mythological domain. At that time, I will be one of the 3 divine king forbidden mythological domains. I will become the true epic overlord, the power of power. The power of the epic overlord would allow Lu Feng to dominate everything, and he would be able to return to the original universe. However, after hesitating, Lu Feng finally gave up on everything. Although the achievement of being the epic overlord was within his reach, Lu Feng still gave up because he really could not do it. If it was not for the words of human king ancestors Phantom, perhaps I would have shattered all the domains and entered the mythological domain. But now there is no need for me to do so, although I also desperately wanted to go back. It is not worth it to use such means. After all, I will have to use my future life to exchange for this. Others might not know, but as a child of the Lu family, Lu Feng understood the gift of spacetime very well. He knew that once he accepted the gift of spacetime, it would mean that he had accepted the control of spacetime. He, Lu Feng, would no longer be Emperor Lu Feng. He would be a subject of spacetime, a titled Emperor Lu Feng. This was something Lu Feng could not accept. Actually, the great beings of the Divine King who can destroy everything, even the great beings of the Divine King or the Epic Overlords, can hide in any spacetime and find and destroy them. The most fundamental reason is the gift of spacetime. The gift of spacetime might have shortened the time they needed to become overlords. However, at the same time, the depths of their souls were implanted with a spacetime imprint that belonged to spacetime. When the Great Tribulation of the universe arrived, no matter where they hid, they would be found and dragged out completely by the Great Tribulation of the universe. This was the truth. Of course, if that was the case, Lu Feng would not care about anything. After all, there would finally be a day when he could transcend the great calamity of the universe. However, he could not accept the gift of spacetime. Just as Lu Feng knew, once he accepted it, he would no longer be Emperor Lu Feng. He would become an emperor enslaved by spacetime. In that case, he could rely on his combat strength to break through the shackles of the forbidden mythological domain and become a supreme overlord in the future. However, his goal was to become a supreme overlord. Lu Feng did not want to. He really did not want to just become a supreme overlord. This was because he knew that the existence of a supreme overlord was not the strongest. They could not transcend all shackles and truly stand alone between heaven and earth. They were eternal, invincible sovereigns. Therefore, in the face of this moment where he could reach the heavens in a single bound, Lu Feng chose to give up. Lu Feng's smile became more and more obvious. With an expression that no one could understand, he stretched out his arm. At this moment, countless existences held their breath. They understood that Lu Feng was finally going to make a choice. 3 great realms, these are 3 great realms. What kind of existence is this young man? How can he be so monstrous and heaven-defying? Even the legendary existence, the legendary ultimate king, they can't do it to such an extent. Why is he so heaven-defying? He did not say the last sentence. Because not only him, but those ordinary spectators were also at a loss at this moment. They were also stunned. They looked at Lu Feng in the distance. They watched as Lu Feng waved his arm and wielded a powerful force, bestowing the 3 great space-time blessings in front of him. Just like that, obliterated, was it really obliterated? Lu Feng, just like that, obliterated the possibility of becoming a king in a single step? They had never heard of this scene before. They had never heard of it. This was simply a scene that made one's hair stand on end. It was simply an unbelievable scene. He took a breath, took 2 breaths, but the turbulence in his heart could not be calmed down no matter what. The Moonhowl sect master looked at Lu Feng. In a flash, he seemed to have thought of a legend. Legend has it that there are 5 ultimate kings in this era. They travel through eras and are born in every era. These 5 ultimate kings are the ultimate existences. No one can describe how monstrous and heaven-defying they are. However, they only reach the peak of the Hunyuan Golden Immortal Realm in every era before giving up completely and disappearing completely. It was the same when the 5 ultimate kings reached the Immortal Realm. They would obliterate the space-time blessings completely, not accepting the slightest bit of it. This young man, his true identity is the ultimate king. This was the only possibility, the only reason. After shattering the space-time blessings, Lu Feng felt a kind of space-time rage. However, Lu Feng was still smiling. It was a completely indifferent smile. He shook his head gently. To me, the so-called space-time gift is just something that is dispensable. As for your anger, I don't care at all. Space-time origin, you are the same as the universe origin. You are a pitiful existence. You don't have any ability to restrain the strong. Without violating the rules, you can't even punish an ant. Sad, you are really sad. The anger of space-time became even more terrifying. However, in the face of this, Lu Feng was still indifferent. Finally, he waved his arm again, dispersing the endless clouds in the sky. Clear colors appeared in the sky once again. Seeing that Lu Feng had completed all his actions, those existences still stood in place. They didn't dare and couldn't do anything. They knew that although Lu Feng was really weak now, he wasn't someone they could do anything to. Lu Feng was still standing quietly in the void. He didn't move, as if he was waiting for something. Finally, after a while, everyone understood what Lu Feng was waiting for. Endless truths. So many truths. He is going to condense an invincible body. He is going to defy the heavens, the sacred truth body. At this moment, Lu Feng was really going to condense the complete sacred truth body. He already had the sacred truth body. However, because his realm wasn't high enough, he couldn't condense the truth into it. Therefore, Lu Feng's sacred truth body wasn't complete. Now that he had reached the God realm, he could finally condense the invincible body. In a trance, endless truths emerged from all time and space. They were truths that tore apart time and space and tore apart the chaos of the entire era. The entire battle platform square had a radius of 100,000 miles. However, the truth that appeared at this moment had completely filled up the entire place. The expressions of many sky immortals and true immortals changed. They realized that the level of this truth was so high that it made them feel like they were looking up to it devoutly. What kind of truth is this? Even existences like us who have mastered the laws feel like we have to bow down and submit to it. Chapter 865. Truth was a power controlled by true immortals. After becoming celestial immortals, they could already control the laws. Even so, when they faced Lu Feng's truth, they were filled with endless reverence. The Moonhowl sect master looked at Lu Feng with a calm expression. For such a heaven-defying monster, the body that he has refined is naturally something that others will never be able to reach. Therefore, the truth that forms this body of truth is also a terrifying existence. It's only natural that you can't bear it. Indifferent, truly incomparably indifferent. But in his heart, stormy waves had been set off. Perhaps at this time, as a peak Hunyuan golden immortal, he felt his insignificance for the first time. Endless truth poured in, allowing Lu Feng to feel the transformation of his body. This was a fundamental change, a complete metamorphosis. Lu Feng's power was terrifying, powerful, and gradually, it changed completely. He could clearly feel that his physical strength had entered a kind of peak. He only needed a little bit more to break through and complete the true transformation. At the last moment, Lu Feng opened his eyes. His eyes were filled with shocking brilliance. And it was at this moment that the truth that filled 100,000 miles all poured into Lu Feng's body. It was completely absorbed by Lu Feng. Metamorphosis. Shocking metamorphosis. 10 times amplification, invincible body. This was the power of Lu Feng's current fleshly body. He finally did it. Standing quietly in the sky, Lu Feng could feel the waves of invincible aura around him. Lu Feng laughed, and it was a crazy laugh. After going through so much, he finally came to this day and stood at a brand new starting point. Feeling the aura of heaven and earth, Lu Feng's madness remained. The next moment, his voice rang out, causing heaven and earth to tremble slightly. Since we're already here, let's tremble together. My world appear. World. Lu Feng wanted to condense the power of the world together. Lu Feng knew that he was not really at the peak now. Only by condensing the power of the world could he truly reach the level of the virtual king. Otherwise, he would not have any ability to fight against those virtual king powerhouses. Therefore, at this moment, Lu Feng wanted to condense the world together so that he could truly possess the power of the world. In the haze, heaven and earth gave birth to nothingness, opening up chaos, evolving into chaos, and a vast illusory image appeared. This was the embryonic form of the world, this was the embryonic form of a complete world. Seeing this scene, countless existences sucked in countless cold breath. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. It's not over. He's actually going to continue condensing the world. But, how can he condense the world? How can he condense the world now? World, that was the hope of every immortal. Condensing the world meant that they would enter the legendary realm, the level of golden immortal. In the Moonhowl sect, there were dozens of virtual king, which was the golden immortals, and hundreds of immortals. At this moment, there were more than 300 immortals here. 300 immortals, their lifelong goal was to pursue the realm of golden immortals, but they had not succeeded until now. What about Lu Feng? He was just an existence who had just become an immortal, and had not even reached the realm of true immortals, but he had actually started condensing his own world in front of everyone. How could these existences be at ease, if only they could calm their hearts? However, Lu Feng did not see any of these people's attitudes, because he was now at a critical moment. Lu Feng understood the existence of the world very well, even more than many virtual king powerhouses. Every time he used 1 billion mortal worlds, 1 billion immortals, it was a kind of understanding of the world. When he fought against the god-slaying Overlord, he had used 1 million mortal worlds, 1 million immortals. At that time, he had comprehended over 1 million mortal worlds. Therefore, Lu Feng's understanding of the world was beyond everyone's imagination. However, he only understood the world, and had no experience in condensing the world. Therefore, this was actually the first time Lu Feng had truly condensed his own world. Gradually, the embryonic form of the entire world had been gradually developed, and countless power mysteries began to be injected into the framework. Everyone knew that at this point Lu Feng's world was almost formed. The most important thing in condensing a world is the condensation of the embryonic form of the foundation. Obviously, this terrifying monster has already realized this. In the beginning, condensing the embryonic form of the world was really easy for him. Many people showed a look of jealousy. Among the hundreds of heaven immortals in the Moonhowl sect, there were no less than 10 heaven immortals at the peak. However, they were all trapped at the peak of heaven immortal. The reason for all of this was that they could not smoothly comprehend the world, and could not smoothly condense the embryonic form of the world. However, Lu Feng in front of them succeeded so smoothly and directly condensed it. This made them feel really unbalanced in their hearts. However, even if it was unbalanced, they could not do anything to Lu Feng. Because at this moment, Lu Feng had already entered the final stage of condensing. Condensing the world meant that he had control of a territory, and could shape anything he liked in his own territory. And these truths, and even the injection of the laws, were the cornerstones that could shape everything. Soon, countless laws were completed. In the void, that huge shadow gradually took shape. Really, it was huge, extremely huge. It was dozens of times larger than the battle stage that was 100,000 miles wide. It could be said that the world condensed by Lu Feng was beyond everyone's imagination, but also within their imagination. Such a huge world is more terrifying than the worlds condensed by those peak Hunyuan golden immortals. However, for such a heaven-defying monster like him to condense such a world, it is actually acceptable. If it were others, these people would not believe it. After all, this scene was too bizarre. However, after witnessing the two shocking scenes of Lu Feng, it seemed to be nothing at this moment. Finally, the final condensation was completed. At this moment, shocking brilliance descended from the void, illuminating the ancient time and space. It was so brilliant that it made people's hearts sway and their souls tremble. This was a brand new world, a brand new great world that was born. In this world, it was still lonely and dry, but this did not mean that it would always be so. Everyone knew that as long as Lu Feng was fully familiar with the existence of this world and completely controlled it, then he would be able to create some living beings in his own world. Of course, those living beings that he created would not be able to appear in this world. After all, they were only created by him, and were completely incompatible with this source world. He succeeded. He let out a sigh that was filled with too many emotions. Thousands of emotions were fused into this deep sigh and completely disappeared. At this moment, the Moonhowl sect master looked at the people around him and said slowly, "All right, let's go and congratulate this heaven-defying monster together, and continue to create shocking sacred relics." After saying this, the Moonhowl sect master took a step forward and was about to walk towards the void. Unfortunately, the moment he took a step forward, the scene in the void made him stop in his tracks, leaving him completely dumbfounded. This Lu Feng's existence was to shock, to make billions of living beings incomparably shocked. He was the incarnation of shock. After completing the heaven-defying condensation of the world, it should be time for Lu Feng to retract the world and return to normal. But he did not do so at all. Because Lu Feng, there was another turbulence, and this time, the turbulence made him even more shocked and trembling than before, feeling the existence of this world, feeling the blessing of the world's power. Lu Feng felt that he had really changed at this moment. In his own world, he had a feeling that he was in control of everything. In this place, he was God. This was not the kind of God that was cultivated by a martial artist. This was the God in the legends, in the myths. The existence of God was the creation of the world. They ruled over everything, with a thought, life and death in an instant, terrifying, powerful, unfathomable, eternal. This was God. In this world, Lu Feng felt like he was a god. Compared to when he had entered the taboo mythological domain, the feeling of control he had was much more obvious. He enjoyed this feeling very much, but in the next moment, Lu Feng's eyes showed a strange and complicated expression. This is the feeling of God. This is the feeling of being in control of everything. But this feeling, is it real? Vaguely, Lu Feng also understood why those virtual king almighties always had the illusion of being high and mighty and looking down on everything. In their own world, they were the real gods, and this feeling made them gradually get used to the illusion of looking down on all living beings. But was this really real? No. This is just an illusion. The complicated and gentle look in his eyes had disappeared, replaced by a kind of sharpness. Showing off his sharpness. This is actually fake. In his own world, he can become a spirit god sovereign. But, is the world we live in just this simple world? They may be, but I, Lu Feng, am not. Never. His heart was trembling and his soul was screaming. At this moment, Lu Feng shouted out his own voice. No, definitely not. I am the Emperor, the current Emperor, the eternal Emperor. How can I only exist in a small world of my own imagination? That is not the path of I, Lu Feng. In the next moment, Lu Feng was shaken. He looked at the world that had just been created and revealed a sinister and crazy smile. What I want is to be really powerful. I want to be the ruler of everything that I go to. How can I simply sink into depravity like this? So shatter. Let this world become my invincible power, let me become stronger, let me become the ruler of this era, the eternal supreme. Shatter. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.